very extensive.
When you said comes and goes, I have noticed there are times in my life when I've had something to eat that suddenly I've got tremendous knee pain, for example, in the old traditional description of gout. Does diet play a role in this? I mean, is this something, if we're more careful in our 20s and 30s and 40s, we can forestall the onset of arthritis?
So there are certain forms of arthritis. Remember, there's many types of where diet does play a role, and you picked the perfect one.
Yeah,
Gout. So gout is a disease where you can have different periods of inflammation in the joints due to food intake, and this has to do with a food or an amino acid called a purine. And this can be found in red meats, in beer, and different types of foods that you eat, in shellfish. So I always tell people try and avoid these foods. Now, if they avoid them more often, they'll have less attacks of this.
I see.
But sometimes it's more of a genetic reason they build this up. Either they're not pushing it out through the kidneys enough, or they're producing too much in the body. So they can be helped sometimes by the foods you eat, but other times they do need a medicine.
Let me ask you a question. As a person ages and they've had these symptoms, are these the reasons that hips wear out and knees wear out? Is this part of that process where there's actual deterioration?
So these joints can wear out because of arthritis, and then there could be other reasons too, because there's not always one reason that something happens. But there are risk factors on why hips or knees can wear off. Age. So as a person ages, they're more likely to get arthritis. If they have a coexisting comorbidity, like rheumatoid arthritis, you're more likely to get osteoarthritis. If you're taking certain medications, like prednisone, you're more likely to get arthritis because it makes the bones more weak. There's many nutritional deficiencies. There's a lot of different reasons, genetic reasons why people can get these diseases.
Well, obviously, there's a reason this field has become a specialty.
It's a fascinating field, absolutely.
It's way more complicated than someone like me, a layman, is led to understand. But
we try and make it simple.
Well, you know, sometimes we have to accept that life is a complicated thing, and our health is very complicated. And it's kind of like that balloon where you press it over here and it pops out over there. We can often do this to ourselves, and I wonder that seniors take a lot of medications.
They do.
And I'm not sure they're always aware of the interactions of these things.
So you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of things that we can do to ourselves that can cause different disorders, like food intake or taking medications, being overweight, not exercising enough. So there's a lot of prevention that can be done. Eating correctly and exercising. If you're elderly, making sure to pay attention to surfaces around you, not skid floors, making sure mats aren't up, that it's well lit in homes.
Right, those old toe-catching rug runners.
That's absolutely true.
They are. Now, what would, is there, osteoporosis, in my mind, has generated a certain brittleness in the bone structure, so breaks are more, fractures are more common. Is this something that once the process is underway can be stalled or reversed, if you will?
So osteoporosis is a very fascinating disease of where it encompasses patients who have weak bones and they're more prone to fracture. It affects close to 10 million people in the American population here.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very prevalent, much more than we think, more men than women. And once it starts, sure, it can be halted if measures are taken, if secondary risk factors that are found are stopped, for example, diet. Vitamin D has become very, very popular, and checking levels and making sure people have an adequate intake, taking the appropriate amount of calcium.
Calcium, the traditional, give me my milk. Well, let's take a little break here, and let's go visit the Sweezy Institute, where Dr. Sweezy himself and his staff help a patient with an exercise that will help her get in and out of bed.
In the gym where we're going to learn the pelvic pinch. This is a key exercise. It's really a movement that will help you do what you need to do to stabilize your back so that you can make the moves in your life skills without straining or irritating your back and causing pain. To do that, Babe Samra, our physical therapist, is going to teach Anya Kemak, who's a personal trainer and works with us here at the Institute. Now, this program of back stabilization with the pelvic pinch as the key to it is what we're going to move from right now.
Okay. Anya, what I need you to do is I'm going to have you bend one knee at a time and put your foot flat on the bed, okay? Then next thing you're going to do is I'm going to put my hand up under here. You're going to gently squeeze your stomach and tighten your buttocks and push your stomach down so that you feel the pressure on the hand. Do you feel that? Now this should be a firm feel back here, okay?
Let me just make a point here. When you get that firm feel, you should feel that firm, friendly hand of mine. I hope it's firm and friendly. And that's the way your mattress should feel. And when you're sitting down, that's the way it should feel in your back against the chair. This is key to back comfort and back support and back stabilization.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to have you do it. Okay, why don't you put your legs down. All right. Now, one leg at a time, you're going to bend your knee and put your foot flat on the bed. Other knee, flat on the bed. Your stomach, everything, you're flat.
Just a point about that one knee at a time. It's much easier on your back to deal with one leg coming up at a time than when you try to bend two. And when you're having severe pain, any pain you can avoid is a plus.
Right, it's really to prevent straining. So, okay, my hand goes under here. Now you're going to tighten your stomach and squeeze your buttocks. And that's a good feel. I can feel some pressure back there. That's perfect. Okay? Now that's the pelvic pinch. In summary, to do a pelvic pinch, you should first lie on your back with your knees up and your feet flat. Then push your stomach in and squeeze your buttocks together. It's a very subtle movement.
Now we're going to incorporate the pelvic pinch into life skills. Here in the bedroom, I'd like you to meet Kathy Warner, our occupational therapist. She's going to first demonstrate how to get in and out of bed with as little pain as possible. Kathy?
Thank you, Dr. Sweezy. And here we have Janet with us today to help us demonstrate these. What we're going to be teaching you is how to get in and out of bed and how to do a log roll. All of these will help you do it with as little pain as possible. We're going to incorporate the pelvic pinch into these movements. Okay, Janet, first what I want you to do is do your pelvic pinch, okay? And as you sit down, reach for the bed also with your hands so that you're supporting yourself and stabilizing yourself. Okay. There you go. Once you're at that point, hold your pelvic pinch and scoot back. Okay. You can see how Janet did that. She's scooting back on the bed. Great. As Janet's going to be lying down, what we're going to want to incorporate again is the pelvic pinch. She's going to be reaching for the side of the bed and incorporating that stabilization for us. Okay, Janet, reach for the side of the bed with your hands. Bring your legs up. There you go. Get your head down on the pillow. Good. All right. Again, maintain that pelvic pinch. And we're going to roll using these 3 points as a reference point. She's going to move her knees, her hips, and her shoulders together. Okay, Janet. Great. All right. And she's stabilizing and hopefully doing that in a comfortable way. Now, when we're going to get out of bed, again, we're going to be doing our pelvic pinch, holding that. We're going to move in our log roll fashion. Okay. Here we go. Pelvic pinch, log roll to your side. Good, good. Okay, when we're going to get up, this is important that you use your hands here to push off with and you swing your legs down at the same time. Maintain your pelvic pinch. And here we go. Up. Good. All right. As you can see, she's moving through these units and she's holding that pelvic pinch and using the log roll. And as we're going to get out, we're going to scoot forward again. There you go. Nice wide base of support. There you go. Okay, and stand up. Thank you. In summary, what we tried to do today is show you in the bedroom the incorporation of the pelvic pinch with your life skill of getting in and out of the bed and using the log roll.
Wow, that was great. These are learnable skills, aren't they?
These are applicable exercises that people can take home with them and use in their everyday life to feel better when they have arthritic pain.
Well, of course, I was chuckling to myself, I must admit, because I'm thinking, okay, getting into bed, I got to move a 12-pound dog and a 30-pound dog. You know,
So it becomes a challenge, you see, and you have to learn how to do it appropriately in your setting.
Now, what about the role of exercise? I know I'm forever telling people you've got to be more active, you know, don't become a vegetable. But good exercise can help with all of these symptoms of rheumatological disorders.
Well, there's aerobic exercise, and that allows you to increase your heart rate and allows you to function better overall, which should be done a few times a week. And there are also other things like strengthening exercises and resistance exercises, which can be done. And they can be maintained on an everyday basis to maintain what you have, your range of motion of different joints and muscles, and to strengthen what's already there. A lot of times this can be done at home.
Right, and some simple exercises too, sitting in a chair or being able to maybe do a squat to keep your quads tight.
Sitting in a chair and just elevating your legs up and holding it strengthens the quadriceps here, and it allows the kneecap or the patella bone to become stronger when you have a knee issue.
Great. See, these are all handy tips. Now, it's time for another break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion on rheumatology and the Sweezy Institute. We'll be right back.
I have cash for 7 to 9 days. I also have a copy of my passport, birth certificate, and insurance papers.
Hi, it's me. I have water and food.
Don't forget, we'll need a first aid kit and my prescription medicine.
Got your message. I have clothes and a flashlight pack. I'll bring batteries and some tools, too.
We'll bring the radio.
A disaster can happen anytime. Are you prepared? At your next family gathering, build your emergency kit. Find the 10 essential items and more at labt.org. Just be ready. Prepare together.
Before approaching an intersection. So that's why 2 wrong turns don't make a right turn. Now let's learn about tailgating.
Hey, that's how I got my ticket.
You got a ticket for tailgating? That's not good. That can be really annoying.
Doesn't get you there any faster.
It leaves you no distance to brake.
Which makes it easier to get into a crash.
And it also may increase your insurance premium.
And I hate tailgaters.
Tailgating causes crashes. Back off. Watch the road.
Welcome back to Aging in LA. Our topic today is prevention of musculoskeletal problems. Our guest is from the Sweezy Institute, Dr. Elise Rubinstein. Doctor, the prevention is such an important element in this, and you already showed, you see, even sitting in a chair, how lifting your leg can help with the quadriceps and alignment. Are there other sort of simple, at-home exercises that a person can do?
Absolutely. And what I did is I brought with me one of these exercise balls that we have at the Sweezy Institute.
Yes,
right
I
now.
noticed that big white thing
See it
right
sitting
there.
right here.
Now, what is this called?
So this is called an osteoball.
Osteoball, okay.
And it's an amazing tool that we have, and it's a way to strengthen muscles and in fact increase bone mass. It has shown with some of the studies that we have. And what this is this ball that's inflated 2/3 the way.
2/3 of the way, right.
It's used for isometric or resistance exercises. So you have 2 little handles here, and you pull outward on it, and then you hold at that place.
I see.
And it can be done with a lot of different
Okay,
exercises.
now, is it, it's not heavy at all.
Very light.
Okay,
Anybody,
'cause
even a 90-year-old could sit there and pick this
well,
up.
exactly.
It's still there.
Yeah, well, exactly. And there are a whole lot of exercises listed here and numbered. Now, I believe we have some footage of this actually being utilized so people can have an idea of how handy this could be. Is this something that can be prescribed at the Institute?
Absolutely. We do that a lot for people that want this type of exercise. It works very well.
Well, let's take a look at an exercise using the osteoball that is a good upper back strengthener. The trainer is Kathy Stevens.
You'll be positioning the ball behind you against the wall. You'll have the ball level with your hips and your palms flat against the ball. You're going to be exercising the muscles of the upper back, backside of the shoulders, and in general, all those postural muscles between the shoulder blades. So what you're going to want to do is step about 2 to 4 inches away from the ball so that your hips aren't touching the ball. And then you're going to create the contraction by pressing firmly into the ball, palms to ball, pushing that ball against the wall. And you want to progressively increase that tension, contracting between the shoulder blades, the backside of the shoulders, even a little bit down the triceps as you take the deep breath and count out. Push 1 through push 5. It's going to be important as you do this exercise that you keep your head and neck in alignment. A tendency might be to jet forward with the chin as you're pressing. So be aware of good standing alignment and then start that second repetition. Pushing the palms, contracting back, opening up the shoulders and chest, squeezing and contracting, and counting down. Push 1 through push 5. And then you can relax against the ball.
Wow, that was very interesting. And it appeared to be quite simple. And those exercises are all illustrated on this ball.
It's for easy use. It comes with a manual, and then people can just do it right from looking at the ball themselves once they get used to it.
Right,
Very simple.
exactly. Well, I'm going to ask the ball to take a powder. We have heard so often that people are afraid of being evaluated for fear of terrible news. But what is the process for a person to contact the Sweezy Institute and come in for evaluation when they know something is wrong?
Okay. So it depends the route that they're going. So if it's for osteoporosis, what they would do is they contact the Institute, they would get an appointment and come in for a bone density examination or a DEXA. And it's a very simple procedure. They lay flat on what would be considered like an examination bed, and then you have a bar above you that just goes forward and back. Takes about 15 minutes.
Wow, that's
It's not invasive. Very little radiation. You get more radiation when you fly from Los Angeles to San Francisco than you would get sitting on this.
Really? Oh, that's
Very nice to
wonderful.
know that.
That is good, because people do have concerns about that.
I ask this question a lot.
Now, you mentioned way at the beginning here that men get more rheumatoid arthritis than women?
No, actually women,
Women do
males get
first,
more
okay.
than men
Okay,
for rheumatoid
and
arthritis.
doesn't that a lot have to do with hormonal changes that women go through after menopause and on?
Well, for rheumatoid arthritis, it can happen almost at any age. There is a subset of people which get it, the majority of them in their 20s and 30s and 40s, but then there's an older segment that can get it in their 50s and 60s. But things like osteoporosis is, I think, what you might have been referring
that's
to.
the one.
Yeah, can happen more commonly to women after they go in menopause. Their estrogen levels decrease, and the first 7 years after menopause, there's almost a 20% loss in bone density.
Wow.
So it's really imperative at this time to go get checked with DEXA for a bone density examination to see where you sit at and what you need to do.
Right. I can think of so many times Granny Grace lived with us in the house, and watching those physical changes, the shrinkage and suddenly the back that was bowed, and watching those changes.
So it's very interesting. Osteoporosis can a lot of times be a silent disease of where we don't see anything or know what's happening until a fracture or a break occurs in the spine. Other times there can be physical manifestations of compression fractures, or what you had talked about, the hunched over feel where you get the back that's bowed, where the patient becomes kyphotic. And this interferes with their daily life. If you can imagine, you're hunched over and your diaphragm is then being pushed in a different direction. You have more problems breathing because you're in this position. You're walking with a forward gait, so you're walking different, and there's more probability of falling.
And falls are, they're just
and they're
a
already
deadly
there.
thing.
So osteoporosis affects a large percentage of people in more ways than they even think. If they think they don't have the disease, they might.
Are other organs involved? Is this something that sort of spreads when you said systemic? Is it something that would affect, I don't know, hearing, balance?
Well, osteoporosis affects the bones because it's for weak bones, but when a patient starts to hunch over, it can affect their breathing.
I see.
So there might be secondary consequences because of the bones becoming broken with compression fractures or a hip fracture. A patient might be bed-bound, then they lose muscle mass, and other things happened.
Well, now the term we used was musculoskeletal, so I'm assuming muscles are involved here as well as they attach to the joints. Are those the parts of like the pain puzzle that we go through?
So a lot of the diseases that I take care of, rheumatology encompasses musculoskeletal diseases.
I see,
so
okay.
the joints is where arthritis or osteoporosis occurs. And then we get a lot of other issues with muscles themselves, of where they become inflamed or muscles attached to joints by tendons, and we can get a tendinitis if you've ever heard that word.
Oh, yes, I have.
So this all encompasses the musculoskeletal system. So people can have areas of pain that are next to the joint, like a tendinitis or an inflamed muscle or a bursitis, and these can be overuse injuries or things like this.
You know, it almost sounds like we're talking about the post-football weekend injury report, because people are so athletic these days, especially in their 20s, and it seems to me that they are taking some long-term risks with their joint and bone health.
Well, you absolutely do. So one of the big risk factors for arthritis or tears in tendons or other things later in life is prior trauma, or athletes that are excessive athletes, high-endurance athletes.
Right, those extremists.
Can hurt themselves. Boxers, when they're punching the bag, can hurt the base of their thumb. You have different athletes which can injure different areas of their body, and they're more prone to it. Kickboxers can injure their hips, if you can imagine, from kicking the bag.
What about things like Little League elbow? You know, we have rules where the kids aren't allowed to pitch more
So
than a
there's
few
tennis
innings.
elbow and golfer's elbow, and people can get this. And I have a lot of men that after a game of golf, they'll come to me and say, it hurts me. And so it was an overuse injury.
Sure.
They need to start abstaining from doing it in the way that they were doing it, or there can be other things that I can help with.
Abstain.
A golfer who loves to golf.
Oh, exactly.
They just want to get back to their activities. They want to live their life and enjoy them. So we give them tips to get back.
So when you feel that twinge, now you'll have a number to call. It's up there on your screen to get a hold of the Sweezy Institute. Now, our time is up for today's edition of Aging in LA. Thanks so much to our guest today, Dr. Elise Rubenstein of the Sweezy Institute. And now, it's time for our feature on Aging in LA, Senior Stat Shots, where we look at statistics and information that pertain to senior citizens. And once again, we found today's statistics in the recently released LA County Seniors Count, a survey of the older adult population in Los Angeles City and County. That's about 1,300,000 people. So let's take a look at activities that seniors in the Los Angeles area are most interested in taking part in terms of activities. 47% of our senior citizens would like to be interested in recreational pursuits. 36% in educational activities. 10% would like to be involved in job training and placement. 54%, more than half, want physical exercise. 24% are interested in community involvement and volunteering. 42% like to be entertained at concerts, plays, and sports events. And 25% of seniors enjoy taking part in religious activities. Only 13% had no response to this particular question. And that's today's Senior Stat Shots. Now, you can get a copy of this report simply by going online to www.laccd.org, and that means the Los Angeles County Community and Senior Services. Then click on LA County Seniors Count, and the full report will then appear. Or you can have a copy sent to you by mail by calling 213-738-2065. That's 213-738-2065. The Los Angeles Department of Aging produces this program with City View, Channel 35, so that seniors living in Los Angeles and surrounding communities are well informed of the many issues that face them in everyday life. And also to let you know of the many services that the Department of Aging offers our senior citizens. Now, we'd like to hear from you with comments on the program, what you like, what you think can be improved, and ideas for future programs. So please give us a call. The number's right there on your screen, 213-252-4088. That's 213-252-4088. Call us with your comments and ideas, and we look forward to hearing from you. I'm Paul Peterson for the Los Angeles Department of Aging, the people here at City View, Channel 35, and all of our guests on Aging in LA. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Voting by mail is easy. Anyone can cast a ballot by mail. All ballots must be received by the close of polls on election night. Just fill out your ballot, sign, seal, and mail. It's that simple. Don't wait. Vote by mail today.
LA City View, Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
in here from the CRA here and the staff. Who elected you?
Good morning, Los Angeles, and welcome to the City Council meeting for Wednesday, February 16th, 2011. We're here in the John Farrar Council Chamber, room 340 of City Hall. We meet here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m., and we also are out in Van Nuys once every other month on the first Friday of the month. I want to welcome those members of the public who are here with us and our city family, as well as our viewers on Channel 35, which broadcast these meetings live each time that we're on, and also rebroadcast them in the evening time via tape. We're also available through the internet at lacity.org, not only live streaming webcasts, but also past footage that we archive there. And all of our agendas, our meeting schedule, and the supporting material that council members read is available as well for the public there online at lacity.org. You can also use your telephone, 213-621-CITY, to listen into our council meetings. And if you have any comments you'd like to give today, we have public speaker cards here and in our remote locations in Van Nuys and San Pedro. So please fill out a speaker card, and we'll be happy to hear your comments. We do have 12 members. Mr. Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Weezer, Koretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weston, Zine, Garcetti. 12 members present and a quorum, President.
Thank you. First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
All right. Mr. Zine moves and Mr. Reyes seconds without objection. They'll be approved. Next order of business.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Krikorian moves and Mr. Koretz seconds without objection. Those will be approved as well. Colleagues, if I can direct your attention to our agenda, we'll run through the agenda first. If we can take up the first items.
On the regular agenda, items 1 and 2 are street lighting district ordinances, notice for public hearing.
All right. Anybody wishing to call those special?
There is a card on item 1.
Okay. We'll call that special for card on item 1 and close the hearing on item 2. Let's go ahead. Those are for votes, Mr. Clerk, today?
Yes, they do.
Let's go ahead and open the roll then on number 2 if nobody wishes to call that special. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next items?
Item 3 is a strict street lighting district ordinance notice for public hearing. Council should continue the hearing and present the ordinance on March 9th.
All right, without objection, we'll continue item 3 till the 9th and keep open that public hearing. Next items, please.
Item 4 is a street vacation notice for public hearing. Council should instruct the city engineer to proceed.
Okay, without objection, we'll instruct the city attorney to proceed on that. Please prepare the roll. And tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. Next items?
Items 5 through 13 are building and safety liens notice for public hearing. The department reports that items 5, 7, and 8 can be received and filed inasmuch as those liens have been paid.
Okay, we'll move to receive and file those without objection. Any specials on those items or cards, Mr. Clerk?
You do have cards on items 6 and 10.
Okay, we'll call those special for cards from the public. On the balance of 5 through 13, if we can please prepare the roll, that's 5 and 6, 8 and 9, and 11 through 13. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item, please.
Item 14 is a public convenience or necessity item in Council District 7, notice for public hearing, and there is a request to continue that matter to Friday, February 18th.
All right, without objection, we'll continue item 14 till the 18th of this month. Next items, please.
Items 15 through 40 are items for which public hearings have been held. Item 15 is a commission appointment. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Yes, please. Let's hold the commissioner on the desk.
And there is a request to refer item 18 to the Transportation Committee.
Okay, we'll refer that to Transportation without objection. That leaves us 16 through 40. Colleagues, any specials on those? Mr. Labange.
Number 29 is request of the business community.
We request to call that special?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Labange, item 29. Ms. Perry.
Yes, can we hold 37 on the desk?
Ms. Perry calls 37 special. Other specials, colleagues? If there are, let's see, no other specials, let's go ahead and prepare the roll on the balance and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 41 through 58 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration. On item 48, there is a request to continue that matter 1 week to February 23rd.
Okay. If there's no objection to continuing that 1 week, we will do so on item 48.
And, Mr. President, on item 57, there's a technical correction. Recommendation 2 should read instruct the controller as opposed to the city clerk.
Okay. Let's go ahead and amend that without objection. Special items. Oh, do we have cards on any of these first?
Yes, Mr. President, there are cards on item 44, 46, and that appears to be added in the section.
Okay. And we'll call 56 special for Mr. Zine. Other specials, colleagues? Ms. Perry?
44 special for Mr. Parks, please.
Okay. Other specials? If not, let's go ahead then and close the public hearings on the others, and please prepare the roll on the balance, and please tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those are approved as well. Next items, please.
Items 59 through 62 are the closed session items. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
No, I think we can handle those all in open session, if we can go ahead and go through those settlements.
Okay, on item 59, there is a recommendation to reject that settlement offer in the case of Richard Romney versus City.
Okay, let's hold 59, and why don't we go to 60, 61, and 62? Go ahead. Sorry, item 60, please.
Item 60, there's a recommendation for settlement in the amount of $350,000 in the case of Bruce Cohenzada versus City.
Okay, let's go ahead and prepare the roll on item 60 and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. Next item, please.
On item 61, there is a recommendation to reject the settlement offer in the case of Eric Holyfield versus City.
Okay. Anybody wishing to be heard on that item? If not, let's go ahead and prepare the roll on 61 and tabulate the vote.
Ayes.
That is approved. Next item.
And on item 62, there's a recommendation to authorize the city attorney to settle the case of Cambridge Integrated Services Group Incorporated versus City for $200,000.
Okay. Anybody wishing to be heard on this settlement? If not, let's go ahead and prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay. That is approved. Let us take up item 15, our commissioner first, then we'll go back and hear public comment. Mr. Byer would like to come forward to the table. I'd like to recognize Ms. Hahn, our chair of our transportation, our tourism, commerce.
What am I?
TCT.
I know.
Trade tourism. Go ahead, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. We were pleased to have you in our committee this morning. And as I started out, I really do want to thank you for agreeing to serve on the Board of Airport Commissions. These volunteer citizen commissions are an important part of our government here in the city of Los Angeles, but certainly they take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and we really want to appreciate your willingness to serve. And I talked to you a little bit this morning in our committee about this is a great moment for, I think, LAX. We are really on the cusp of completely modernizing that airport, not expanding it, but modernizing it. We want to be ready for the next generation of aircraft that will be coming into LAX, the A380s, the Boeing 787s. We think they're quieter, they're more efficient, they're less polluting, and we want our airport to really be ready to accommodate them. My big issues have always been safety and security of the airport, the traveling passengers, and we feel very strongly about the airport police out there. We think they're doing a great job. We know there's been an independent committee, Blue Ribbon Committee, that's looking at safety and security at the airport. And if they find any vulnerabilities, we want to make sure that our commission and our airport is ready to address those immediately. But one of the things I talked to you about, which this council, I think, is very concerned about as we go forward, letting these multi-million-dollar contracts for modernization, for concessions. We want to make sure they're done open, fair, transparent. We want to make sure there's accountability in how they're awarded, because one of the things we want to make sure of is that there is no appearance at all of a conflict of interest as we move forward granting these contracts. So those are the issues that I just wanted you to be aware of. And we really depend on the Commission to continue to ask the hard questions of the staff at the airport, because we're going to ask those hard questions, and we want to make sure it starts with you. I think Gina Marie Lindsay is doing a terrific job out there. I think her leadership has really moved this airport farther along than ever before in terms of modernization and safety and security. But we just want to make sure we stay on the right path for all the issues that I talked about. And again, we want to thank you and appreciate your service. But for us on the City Council, it's really going to be about accountability at your end. And we know you're up to the task. So maybe you could share with the Council what you shared in my committee about your reasons for serving and what you think you can bring to the table as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. As far as the second part of the question, I'm not sure, but we'll see as that unfolds. The first, it's a great honor, and I appreciate your thanks. I understand your concerns. I've spent a lot of my time either on or running boards of large nonprofits or large corporations. Transparency and these types of issues are at the forefront of everything I've been doing, so I really do understand that. I ran a large business. I left voluntarily about a year and a half ago. I ran into the mayor. He asked if now that I had time I wanted to use some of it for the benefit of the city, and I said yes, and he jumped on that. That was a Friday evening, and on Monday morning I got this call, or this, at least, contact. So I'm happy to do it, looking forward to helping in any way I can. I'm certainly not well-versed on the issues, but expect to be quickly, and hopefully I'll be able to come back at a future date, and you'll think that I've been sensitive to a lot of the major issues that have involved this major project and this major asset of the city for a long, long time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendahl.
Well, good morning.
Morning.
Good to be with you again. As we had our private discussions to understand you better, first just tell me a little bit about your background for my colleagues to appreciate what professionalism you bring to the group.
Well, my background is for the past 26 or 27 years. I've been involved in either working at or helping to manage large financial businesses. I was an investment banker, became an investment manager. TCW Trust Company of the West was the company that I ran most recently, which is a Los Angeles-based but global money management firm. I sit on the board of two Fortune 100 companies. I run a couple of local educational nonprofits. I'm chair of the UCLA Anderson School Business Board. I was former chair for many years of the Harvard Westlakes High School Board. So my background is financial, it's community involvement, it's a lot of the issues that I hope will come to play here.
In fact, it's excellent, and it does bring a level of professionalism that we continue to bring to that board, so I'm delighted you're stepping forward. In our discussions, we talked about modernization, yes, expansion, no. Basically meaning, if we spend this $10 billion or so over the next few years, those costs are passed on to the airlines, and regionalism will happen in Ontario, and at the same time, we will modernize an airport that hadn't been done since 1984. The big issue for the people in Westchester who threw in all these lawsuits is the word expansion. And if you could just clearly say how you see that issue playing itself out and how you see yourself involved in that.
Well, I certainly cannot speak from any experience on that point yet. I understand the sensitivities. I have been involved in some of the other contexts in neighborhood modernization issues, and I do understand that there are many constituents involved in these decisions, and we'll try to be sensitive to trying to come up with a solution that solves the city and the nearby residents and others equally well.
Yeah, and I know you will do that. And the third question I have is the LAX Northside Community Plan. We talked about that. We talked about how that land could be developed in a proper way. We talked about Trivoletti, who's a great planner, and I know you're going to be meeting with her. And there's Otis College that wants to get involved. So I look forward to your leadership on that, the combination of your business experience, your community experience, bringing that to bear and bringing that into the community will be a tremendous asset. So I just want to thank you for stepping up to the plate. I think you'll be a great addition to it, and obviously, colleagues, I think it will be great to endorse it. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have three topics. One is your experiences at LAX as a passenger. You ever done that?
Yes, I have.
Do you find that a pleasant experience?
I wouldn't say it is 100% wholly unpleasant.
Have you ever been to the Southwest line trying to get in?
The Southwest outdoor line is not a pleasant experience on a day like today, and some of the other airports, obviously, around the country with much less to offer have significantly better layouts and operations.
That's one thing I think we all support is the modernization of that facility. The other issue is safety and security. The controller did an audit on salaries from the city of Los Angeles and posted them. And I had my staff go through that for the airport. And I think that as a businessman, if you look at some of these salaries, they have to be examined and they have to be somewhat justified. The chief of police at the airport, his salary is $170,000. They have a police officer 3 making $255,000 a year. A police officer 2, $149,000 a year. A sergeant, $200,000 a year. A safety officer, who's not an armed member of the safety, $180,000 a year. Another safety officer, $177,000 a year. Construction inspector, $214,000 a year. I think what you can do as a commissioner is look at some of those salaries, and maybe they're not managing the overtime. I'm not saying people are cheating, but I'm saying these salaries seem to be way out of whack of reality. If you have a job that pays $87,000 a year and you're making $255,942, that's an incredible amount of money compared to the workforce. So I just bring that to your attention. You may want to look into that as far as, are they managing overtime properly? Are they spreading it around equally? But some of these salaries, when you look at that, and it's all posted on the internet, it's no secret, it really shocks individuals to say, how does someone justify that type of expenditure? We support safety, we support security, but is it done in a proper fashion? And when you've got members of your department outpacing you by $100,000+, there may be some balance that has to be looked at. So I would bring that to your attention as a businessman, and this audit is all, again, posted, and I can give you a copy of this to look at it. I'm not saying we need to cut back on security, but I'm saying, is it all justified when you look at those kind of salaries? And the dollars that go out to the airport are dollars that obviously help benefit the airport and the passengers that serve the airlines.
Well, among the many issues where I have no knowledge yet, I look forward to adding that one and getting some context, but
It's
points well taken.
It's pretty blatant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you, Robert, for the 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 hours a week you're going to be dedicating for free on this very, very important commission. This is one of the small handful of heavy-duty commissions within the city of Los Angeles. And looking at your resume, it looks as though the city is certainly getting their money's worth. I say that in jest. We certainly are getting somebody who could be doing a lot of wonderful things with their time, and here you are dedicating your time to the city of LA. So I wanted to thank you for all of your commitment and hopefully many years of service on this commission. You certainly are well qualified and very generous to offer yourself to be on this commission. But there's one thing that I want to ask you. It appears that you've been responsible for a lot of things at very high levels within the private sector. And with that, do you tend to have people that you hire and that report directly to you?
Well, I certainly have historically, but I've also, in the last context of running an investment management firm, run portfolios myself the entire time. So I think I've seen both sides of that.
Okay, good. The reason why I asked that question is because it's my understanding that the commissioners at the LAWA, what you get is you get people that report to you, such as people who may answer phones, take messages, forward information to you, etc., but you don't necessarily get analysts that report directly to you. The analysts for LAWA actually report to the executive director and that hierarchy of individuals, correct?
I'm not familiar with how that works yet, but I would expect that that might be the case.
Yeah, it's my understanding that that is the case, that you get, that the commissioners do get staff that report to you or that will help you with administrative matters, but not necessarily people who report directly to you and first and foremost to you when it comes to technical matters, analysis, etc. Engineers, architects, management staff, etc. They report to the executive director, which is fine. But the thing that the reason why I'm having this dialogue with you right now is the board is actually the decision-making body for LAWA. The reason why matters are going to come before you is because your vote says whether or not that project will in fact go forward or whether or not that RFP is in fact going to be approved. Because really what happens is all of these technical people, really what they're doing to the board is they're basically making recommendations. But the actual policy decision is going to sit with the board as a whole and with the individual members like yourself. So I just wanted to let you know that if in the future, for any reason, you end up having questions or wondering what's going on or what have you, please exercise your authority and your responsibility to postpone an item, dig into the item, and then actually decide for yourself whether or not that recommendation is, in fact, the best thing for LAWA. And the reason why I say that is because I've had, on occasion, and most of the time LAWAs run very well, and they do a wonderful job, but I have had on occasion situations where I wish that I had staff reporting to me that could actually delve into the issue deeper so that all of those concerns that I have could be laid to rest and I could feel comfortable with my vote. because on occasion, the actual actions by the board actually get 245 to the council, and then we end up being the last word on whether or not that policy decision will stand or not. So I just wanted to let you know about that. I look forward to sitting down with you, hopefully more often than not, and I have the Van Nuys Airport in my district, but I do care about the Ontario Airport, LAX, etc., like all the responsibilities you will have. But I just want to invite you to understand that I do look forward to sitting down with you, and I do look forward to talking with you about some of the things that perhaps you should keep your eye on over at LAWA. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you. I look forward to it as well, and I appreciate the advice. Thank you.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to thank you for your time, your commitment to the City of LA. I'm sure you're aware of all the discussions that have occurred in this venue. And I really think Gene and the staff are doing their best, or trying their best, to address a very complicated process. I also know in the near future we're going to be going through processes of engaging bids, looking at real physical change, looking at how we can change the environment and the experience in the airport. With it goes a lot of decisions. I wanted to ask you, given your knowledge of this body, what would be your approach in trying to communicate to us pivotal issues, controversial issues? Is there a process in your mind that you see engaging, given how the city tends to function? I'd just like to be very straight with you and try to get your perspective on how you see addressing us.
I'll be straight back. I completely understand the question. I just don't feel educated enough on how the information flow currently works and how involved or not involved this body gets on routine issues. And hopefully I'll get that knowledge quickly, and I'm happy to meet with you individually to talk through how that might be altered or how it might satisfy the requirements today. But, I need to be open to making sure that you're informed enough to make the decisions that are needed so that we can all do our job and you can feel confident that we're doing that. And I'm just, unfortunately, not familiar with it enough yet.
Well, my main objective is to make sure we have an environment where we get the highest quality with the best price. An environment where industry right now is elbowing, posturing, trying to get to these contracts. But how we get to the best contract with the advice of our professionals is key. And that's the environment I'm trying to seek. So for that, I thank you, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Any other members of the council wishing to be heard? If not, we'll take a vote now. Let's go ahead and prepare the roll on the nomination. And please tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
A squeaker.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. We'll go now to our general public comment. Our first speaker is Dr. Clyde Williams.
Dr. Clyde Williams. Hey, Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Bear Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. It's raining. However, we have the stormwater or urban stormwater management plan, but we don't know where it is. We don't know what's happening to it. Oh, but we heard that the state has given the power to LA County to assess property tax roll fees. So we're quite concerned that, number one, we don't know what LA City Department of Public Works is doing regarding stormwater. We do know that 2 years ago they tried to get it through, almost 100% increase in the property tax fee. However, you declined to accept it. Now we are faced with the LA County assessing stormwater fees for the city, the county as a whole, including the Los Angeles City, and adding that to the tax rolls. In order to give the Public Works Department their fair share of that money, they need an agreement. So we don't know where the agreement stands right now, and we need to have a total review, maybe an audit by the controller, of the entire urban stormwater management plan and its status. You're going to have Prop O facilities discussed tomorrow, And by the way, they're not being operated, they're not being maintained. Water is backing up, ponding on the streets, creating more potholes that we will be listing. But we need to know how much this is going to cost, because I figure $500 a lot by the year 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Peggy Hill is our next speaker. After that is LaRon Gubler. Peggy Hill here? Oh, there she is. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Mr. Garcetti? Are you Mr. Garcetti?
We moved the microphone down a little bit. There you go. Now we can hear you better. Thank you.
Hi. Well, the first thing I want to tell you all is we're living in the last days. Black Jesus is coming. Have you ever noticed on the street how they're predicting the 21st of May will be the last judgment? I want everyone to know that because, of course, Jesus Christ coming back is the most important thing in all time. I have other things to tell you about how I feel about the police department. And since I am a prostitute, I've gotten arrested a few times for it. This has all been, not recently, but the police are very lewd to the women when they are arrested for that. And I think it's really bad because, for one thing, we are to treat our superiors with respect, but when we get picked up for a prostitution and are practically asked for it again by one of the police officers that picks us up, that is really bad, and the way they talk to us is really bad. There's so many other things that I'd like to talk about. I'd like to know why in the fire department and the police department there's no equality. As far as I see, most of the police and the fire departments are white folks and maybe Hispanic. Very few of the wonderful black men that maintained order and a good relationship with the community from days gone by. I'm pretty old now, but that's been going on for a long time. There's so many other things that I wanted to tell you about the way that the poor people in the Skid Row area are treated by the little stores. Why is it that all these people can get loans and everything to have businesses, but they're allowed to treat people so badly? You know, it makes you lose your self-respect. There's so many other things I'd like to talk about. One thing is, how come you guys can't clean up the sidewalks on the various streets down there? You won't do it. I don't know why. You put those big machines and clean those up. It makes people feel better.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments here this morning. LaRon Gubler is our next speaker. Hey, ma'am, can we please remove her from the chambers? Mr. Gubler is our next speaker.
Well, good morning.
Sorry, and if everybody could please give their attention to Mr. Gubler. Thank you.
Good morning, council members. I'm LaRon Gubler, President and CEO of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. Here today, just wanted to thank the council for including in the P3 RFP protections for the business districts in Hollywood and Westwood and elsewhere. This is very important to our
Mr. Gubler, I'm going to stop you and actually start you again. Folks, if I can please ask folks to wrap up their conversations. Please keep it quiet, and we'll reset your clock if you'd like to start again. Please, Mr. Gubler.
All right. Well, on behalf of the Chamber, I wanted to thank the Council for including protections in the RFP that went out on the P3 initiative. This was very important to our business community. I believe that the fact that there were no responses to the RFP...
And I'm sorry to interrupt you again. We actually have this on the agenda today, so this is for items that are not on the agenda. So general public comment is for items that aren't on the agenda. I can put your card in for that item, and I know we'll take public comment openly before we would go into closed session. So we'll make sure that those comments are given. My apologies. Anybody else who wanted to speak on that who has cards in, just let me know, and we'll make sure they get in there. Mike Kolker is our next speaker.
Hi, my name is Mike Kolker. I'm the elected member of the Atlanta East Side Community Development Agency's Project Area Committee. Is Mr. Reyes in the room at all? because Mr. Reyes, I'm his constituent, and this is specifically about his district. If he's not, I'd like to have my comments postponed until he's back in the room.
Okay, you may have gone to the restroom for a moment,
Can I
so
have my
let's
comments
you hold on for
postponed?
1 second. Okay,
Thanks.
we'll call you back up.
Thanks.
John Walsh is our next speaker.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org, Facebooking at Mickey Jackson, M-I-K-I. Throwing out old white ladies now? I didn't even hear what she said. You're afraid of old white ladies? Mr. Weezer, where is he? 2 days in a row, he's campaigning. I like to say, I don't know where Mr. LaBonge is, but I know that the Daily News supported editorially his opponent, clean sweep man, Stephen Box. We had an enormous victory today. You have again postponed for the fourth time the $920 million big steal. Why? And you gave no date certain. It's sort of just fading away. Maybe it's waiting for 21st of May when the world is going to end. Dennis Winston was our lawyer. We went to him. We paid him greenback money. He wrote a letter to you. He said that what you were doing violated the law. It violated the law because the CRA board voted on it. Madeline Janis, we just found this letter which was sent to you, a cautionary letter to Madeline Janis telling her, quote, in the event any matter comes before the board that raises potential conflict of interest, we encourage the nominee to seek the advice of the city attorney. She didn't do that. We put it here. Now, little Ricky up here, he doesn't even have a reason. It's become a pilgrimage. We come down here and you back down. The CRA is dead. The $920 million is dead. Bob Blue, John Walsh, Aaron Epstein, the Hollywood PAC, we smote you. Now, she used the term smote and didn't get in trouble, Miss Perry. We smote you. We took you out. We're winning. I don't have to stay at your darn meeting anymore. I won. You lost. The CRA is finished. I'm going home. Mission accomplished. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh, and have a good day. Stay dry out there. We'll have next Walter Bechtel. Walter Bechtel, come forward. And then after that, we'll hear from Arnold Sachs.
I guess I missed something. I just wanted to say something that it's a public service announcement kind of thing. Maybe I should tell the FBI. I think more people than just went to do that party there that Hugh Hefner had there in Santa Monica came down with that bit there. I ride the bus that goes to Santa Monica, but I don't go any further than mid-Wilshire. The disease, whatever they caught, may have been come from some of the caretakers, or may have been coming from some people working for MTA or something like that. Because I came down with the same kind of upper respiratory problems that I've been sick with for about a week now, and the way they describe whatever they got. So I think that somebody, whoever's doing any research on that, should look into that. But I just wanted to reiterate that when somebody gets up here and has something to say, it's as far as I understand, it is still against it's a violation of the Brown Act to make any snide remarks or comments or shoot spitwads, or proverbial spitwads at them after they leave the podium. This is our only time to say something, and this is our last words, as it were. If you have something to say, then we have a right to rebuttal to something that you have to say about that, instead of making us. I would never forget about the one time when I got up here and the president had to say, he said, now for our next mentally ill person who has something to say. That's against the Brown Act. Please don't do that.
Thank you. Chris Kolker, would you like to come forward? I know Mr. Colker is talking to Mr. Reyes back there, but I'd be happy to take your comments if you'd like.
I'll go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sachs I'd actually call. Do you mind, Mr. Sachs? We'll get you right after. Okay, come on forward. My apologies.
Thank you. Good morning. Arnold Sachs. Well, we finally have an explanation to what has troubled the City Council. Today's incident explains a lot of things. Maybe it was a stress-related, post-traumatic stress syndrome disorder that's afflicted the City Council after the incident that occurred at City Chambers. That's why you can't seem to get anything going. Yesterday's Times, taking aim at pensions. They're talking about supporting Measure G. It mentions that the change could save an estimated $152 million over the coming decade. Do you realize that in that same decade, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel at the AEG complex will not be paying bed tax of 14%, and will be almost $100 million or better that the city won't be getting into its general funds? Don't say anything about those funds, but it won't cost the city anything to build anything at that complex. Nobody's mentioning anything about what it would cost to operate things at that complex. And I'd like to thank Councilman Zine. Last week he clarified that the over $800,000 that is being returned to the general funds for this year's NBA Slam Fest will be reimbursed. So in 2004, when they had the NBA All-Star Game and Slam Fest, Jam Fest, whatever here in LA, let's just say this is a 25% increase for this this show on the road. So in 2004, it would have been like $600,000. But that wasn't returned to the city's general fund because they didn't have to pay. And amazingly, that's the first time that a Staples Center item has been on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. I'm sorry, Ms. Colker, if you'd like to come forward now. Good morning.
Hi. My name is Chris Colker. I'm the Vice Chairman for the Adelante East Side Project Area Committee, although I'm here today representing only my own personal opinion. As you probably know, our Project Area Committee voted unanimously, thank you, to support Governor Brown's proposal to eliminate the CRA. What you may not know is that since that vote was taken, the CRA has withdrawn all support and funding from the PAC in retaliation. The CRA not only refuses to supply administrative support, translation services, distribution of agendas, meeting rooms, but they had their staff contact the Benjamin Franklin Library where we usually meet, and their staff actually emailed the library that the CRA didn't sponsor the PAC and that the library should charge us for the meeting room. And the regular rate for that meeting room is $250 for 4 hours. The CRA is required by law to have a PAC as a conduit for public opinion. The PAC is elected from the community it serves. The CRA has refused to communicate with the PAC in writing on their withdrawal of support and funding. That seems, frankly, wrong. There should be a process. There should be something that they have to do to get that approved. They shouldn't just be able to say, oh, by the way, we're not funding you anymore, and we're not even telling you that we're not funding you anymore. I believe that the PAC has an obligation to represent and to communicate the opinions of the communities that we represent. And I believe that the PAC should do everything it can to continue in that role. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Colker. Appreciate it. Mr. Colker, if you'd like to come forward. No?
If we can ask the councilman to come to the desk, I think he wants to be here.
Okay. Would you like to continue to wait? I know you were just talking to Mr. Reyes. Do you want to wait? It's your
Yes,
call
I'd like to wait till he comes
Laura Lake is our next speaker. Is it for the parking? Okay, I'll make sure it's in the right one. Donna Pearman in Van Nuys is our next speaker.
Hi. Okay, and I'm back again. Anyway, I took off again to try to talk about the $930 million CRA project, and it looks like that's again off. I know, I wasn't here yesterday. Yesterday's my off day, but I took off today so that I could talk about the $930 million CRA project. It looks like you took off again, and it looks like the CRA is being vindictive, disbanding the PACs so that, that anybody that wants to disagree with them or anybody who wants to have an opinion, they don't really want to hear an opinion. Like, I have a feeling that you really don't want to hear an opinion either, and that's why you keep on moving it. The two most costly projects is military and construction. Do we really need the $930 million CRA project? Our council mayor don't care what happens to our core city services or employees as long as the CRA gets to complete and start every project. CRA is slowly destroying Los Angeles with their huge block affordable housing. Looks as huge as a big prison, and with Brown, I don't believe he's really going to cut down the CRA. All he wants to do is tax increases and get rid of teachers. I see that in the paper today. So he double-crossed us. He's listening to Antonio Villaraigosa crying about the CRA, and we need to vote no on the Proposition L because we need to have all the money dispersed fairly among all the city council. And let's see. Anyway, in New York, they're letting a terrorist having been in terrorist leave. Has only been in jail for 4.5 years. He's a member of Al-Qaeda, responsible for thousands of lives. Anyway, we need to get rid of terrorism.
Thank you, Donna. Next speaker is Jose Aguilar.
Hi, my name is Jose Aguilar. I'm president of the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council. I'd like to speak for myself. I'd like to state something here. I just got word that my project area committee, Adelante, CRA, just got defunded. The CRA just told them that they're going to nullify their support for the PAC. They're not going to provide any funding for them to conduct their meetings in the Adelante Eastside Project Area Committee, and I am making the assertion that this is done in direct political retaliation because of the Eastside Adelante's unanimous support of Jerry Brown's proposal to eliminate the CRA and have the funding redirected back to our local services and community. I'm trying to figure out if this city council is in collusion with the CRA in defunding our meetings. The Project Area Committee has bylaws that mandate, that was approved by this city council, that they have mandatory meetings once a month. And that is in violation of the bylaws that this city council voted upon. So I want to know exactly what your collusion is in eliminating funding for a project area in the process of conducting meetings for the public. They're your advisory board. They're the ones that are supposed to advise the city council as to how your redevelopment projects are supposed to be conducted. And I find this appalling that if they say something they disagree with, or they say something against city council's special interest, that all of a sudden they get retaliated on and they get their funding pulled out and they get their meetings canceled, or trying to cancel the meetings by not funding the meetings. I think that is a very insidious part that this city council is, if you allow this to happen, this is very insidious, and I'll do everything in my power to get this out to the media and to make sure, and I'll make it play out in Mr. Weezar's campaign too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colker. Could I come forward? And then Miriam Fogler will follow in Van Nuys.
Thank you very much for postponing my being able to speak. I don't know if you folks have ever heard of the movie with Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but boy, has that been the experience that I've had personally, and the elected project area committee, which I'm a member of, have experienced recently in the Adelante Eastside CRA project area. The bottom line is, about a week ago, I spoke to you and read you a motion that we approved unanimously with tremendous community support for Boyle Heights and Lincoln Heights. And I also read the same motion into the record of the commissioners of the CRA board of, the board of commissioners of the whole CRA. And the motion said very quickly, the CRA's Adelante Eastside Project Area Committee goes on record as supporting Governor Brown's proposal to dismantle community development agencies, including the CRA LA and our own CRA district, if and only if, that's the important part, of course, if and only if the CRA's tax increment money is redirected back to the local schools and local governments as announced. This is a district that's one of the largest, if not the largest, redevelopment agency district in the city of Los Angeles. Well, the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington thing happened. What happened is they retaliated. The CRA, David Ricciatello, the manager that's responsible for the downtown district, the harbor district, and the east side, he retaliated on a phone. He made a phone call to the vice chair of the PAC and specifically said that he was defunding the PAC and refusing to support them anymore. His actions, he's doing everything he can to stop us from ever meeting again, even though we're elected officials, and he's merely an employee, a bureaucrat of the CRA, a highly paid bureaucrat. And the bottom line is he even did things that were, he can't take that action, in my understanding, without the support of not only the commissioners of the CRA, but with the city council, without your legislating getting rid of our PAC, which I hope you don't do, by the way. But the bottom line is he did things that went further than this. The local library, the Ben Franklin Library in Boyle Heights, is where we meet. And what Mr. Ricciatello did is he had Angie Garcia, the secretary for his area, for the East Side area, contact in writing and verbally the librarian, the chief librarian of the Boyle Heights, the Ben Franklin Library in Boyle Heights, and tell them to not follow their own procedures and give us a free meeting room, trying to charge us $250. If you just give me one last second.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, we have to keep it as fair as possible without exceptions, but I'm sorry, and we let people finish their sentence and go a little bit over, but thank you for your understanding. If there's anything else you'd like to submit to us, we'd be happy to take it in writing. Thank you. Miriam Fogler is our next speaker, Van Nuys, and then Armanak Noorajanian.
Here we go, folks. They did this in North Hollywood, PAC. When I was there 20 years ago, they did this twice. And, of course, they've been in North Hollywood. That 740 acres has been under their jurisdiction for almost 50 years, folks. Almost 50 years, and they've done nothing. It's to me, the area is just, they're giving away everything. They've taken out businesses there. It's really bad. The agency is totally bad. And I don't know, you call an open system that you have, you run the system the way you want, you have it the way you wanted to run it for yourselves. It's all earmarked for yourselves. Obviously, the funding that you expect from the federal government to come through, well, let me tell you, folks, it's not going to come through. It's going to be a bombshell because earmarks are going to be AWOL'd. That our money, the 3010, is going to be shelled. No way is it going to happen. Not now. Maybe later, but not now. They got a real bad deficit. So, Antonio, Rosendahl, your legacies are gone. You're all history. But this agency has got no regards at all. The CRA, they have no regards for life, property, the rights of people, the civil rights, human rights that Egyptians so valiantly fought for, and now Iranians are being pounced for their same rights by a dictatorial communistic regime in Iran, a theocracy, who is running very against God. They're anti-God. Did you hear me, Ahmadinejad? You're anti-God. That's against God, to go out and murder people, to blow people up. It's anti-God. God gave us this planet. It's in the Bible.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Reyes wanted to respond to our previous speaker.
Yes, thank you, Council President. I just wanted to address Mr. Kolker. Mr. Kolker, before you leave, come over here. I just wanted to I want to make sure that you know that we are listening. My staff will respond. We will ask questions of the CRA staff, see what environment is being created, and for the record, understand what processes are being invoked in terms of allowing for public engagement. So we will follow up on your observations.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Armanak Noorajanian is our next speaker. Good morning.
Good morning. Respectable City Council members, dear fellow Angelinos, my name is Armanak Noorajanian. I am a progressive agent of change. I'm a liberal candidate for City Council member office, District 8, and I actually stand for progressive policy of social justice in order to achieve prosperity of my fellow Angelinos. What mean as a liberal writing candidate for City Council from District 8, I will reduce middle-class and poor Angelino homeowners' taxes 40%, so that those homeowners would have some savings to fix their dilapidated houses and health problems. I will actually want to offer to fight police corruption by two methods. First, they actually should mandate testing all police officers for subject of substance abuse and terminate deployment of those police officers who have been found positive from those substance abuse. In a second, they should reduce those wages of police officers to about $40,000. Having those police officers making more money than those $40,000 or making outrageous wages like $170,000, something like that, will actually contribute to police corruption and will cause more riots and disturbances in City of Los Angeles. It definitely will cause a huge gap in the budget deficit. And second, my proposal is to eliminate budget deficit of City of Los Angeles, which makes up to $400 million by raising taxes of $4 for each barrel of oil produced in the City of Los Angeles. The reason of 1.44 cents increase of taxes against our oil producing companies is too small. We need to cover budget deficit. We need to issue more.
Thank you, Mr. Narjanian. That will close our general public comment, certainly one of our most memorable. We will next go to public comment on items called special. Number one, we had cards from Mr. John Walsh. Is he still here? Not? Why don't we go ahead then, we'll close the public hearing, and please prepare the roll on item 1 and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Item 29, those questions have been answered, so we can take up 29 as well. If we can prepare the roll on item 29, and please tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay, our next speaker will be for item number 6. Tim Planet, would you like to come forward? Or Tim Plants, excuse me.
Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Got myself in a bit of position.
Can you get a little closer to the microphone or lift the microphone up? Thank you.
I'm in a bit of a position here. I'm on a automotive center, and I have tenants who rent it from me and who are not paying their fees and violations. Not understanding the law correctly, I didn't know that the city could come after me and put a lien on my property. What I'm asking for today is an extension of 1 week so I can enter into an amnesty program where they have a payment program. I have both tenants present. We're in San Pedro, as Mrs. Hahn knows. The business is down between 25 and 35%. It's very tough. We're trying to hang on our own teeth. So any help you could give us to give us an extension of 1 week so we could enter this program and get these gentlemen and myself out of trouble would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Ms. Hahn?
Thank you. Well, you know, this issue's been going on for a while, but I really want to work with you, and that's my, number one priority here today is work with you. So I'm going to do two things. One, we're going to continue this for a week so that you can get into this payment plan program. The other thing I'm going to do for you is I'm going to, if it's acceptable, is remove the interest cost on what you owe. So the interest I think is $971.10. Let's take the interest out. Let's try to work with you, and hopefully we can resolve this and you can hang on.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. So continuation of 1 week and change of that. Okay. Without objection, let's go ahead and prepare the roll. We'll continue that without objection. We'll keep that here in council. Next, we have comments on item 10, and we have Julio Rojas on item number 10. Good morning, sir.
Evelio Rojas, 9950 Equestrian Place, Salinas. Honorable members, I'm saddened to come before you at the end of this particular item for which I have been asking for, quote, an itemized statement. Being a layperson, I go back to asking, what is this made up of? An administrative fee is such a large umbrella. Basically, all my numerous requests have never been responded to. We have tried to comply with everything except these costs under administrative fees. I will take the time, or maybe somebody can point my nose in the right direction on determining when and how administrative fees for this department were leveled at such an exorbitant rate. When I do, I will be more than glad to settle these outstanding issues with the city of Los Angeles. I just felt that you should know, as the governing power, that in March of 2008, I was promised by members of the Department of Building and Safety, the city attorney was there, that they would assist me in every conceivable way, and nothing ever happened. That's why I'm so sad.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to be heard on this from the council? If not, let's go ahead on this item. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Thank you. That is approved. We'll next go to public comment for item 44. LaRon Gubler, let's try a third time. A little more calm in the chambers. And then Laura Lake will follow.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, council members, LaRon Gubler, President and CEO of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, wanted to thank the... Is that better? All right. I wanted to express our appreciation to the City Council for revising the original RFP on the P3 issue to include protections for our garages in Hollywood and elsewhere. I think the fact that there was a lack of response from parking garage operators verifies the concerns that we had initially, that if the original RFP had gone out, that the rates would have spiked. The fact that they weren't willing to submit a bid based on the restrictions would seem to indicate that. Hollywood, as you know, has made tremendous strides in recent years. We've got retail coming back, and the long-term potential to generate revenue for the city is great if we nurture the retail and restaurants and entertainment district in Hollywood. We would call on the City Council to reject any calls to send out the RFP without the carve-outs. We think that would be counterproductive. At this point, rather, let's work together to review other options that might allow the city to improve its return on the garages without sacrificing our business districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura Lake, is our next speaker. After that is John Graff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti and members of the council. I'm here on behalf of the Westwood community. I, too, want to thank the council for trying to protect the business community in Westwood and Hollywood and the other 9 impacted areas. I want to submit today's list of the neighborhood councils in opposition. It's a citywide list because people understand that they may not have a garage, a P3 garage, but they do have parking meters and they understand the connection. I want to thank my council member, Koretz, for insisting that Westwood be protected. The Westwood garage is 4% of P3. It makes a handsome profit every year, and which is turned over to the city. So even with 2 hours free parking for daytime shoppers, we're subsidizing the city of LA. And I think the mayor's gotten it backwards. I don't know what he's thinking. But I would like, and I know the business community of Westwood and Hollywood would like to explore alternatives like the formation of parking districts. And Mr. Cardenas had made a proposal a while back
to start putting the money back into the communities where it's generated, as Pasadena does. So I would really urge this council to put this to rest, roll up our sleeves, have these assets make more money for the city, which they can, through perhaps a parking czar, if you will, and more local control so that they are more closely scrutinized and work with the business community. You'll make a lot more money directly and indirectly doing it that way. And as I said, please put this to rest.
Thank you. John Graff is our next speaker. After that will be Arnold Sachs.
Hi, I'm John Graff with the Reason Foundation. We're a nonpartisan think tank based in Los Angeles. I'm here to speak in support of a public-private partnership to run the city parking garages. Who pays the cost of parking when the costs are not fully borne by the customer? It's the taxpayers of Los Angeles. That includes people who cannot or do not choose to own a car. Does this council believe it's right for a person who rides the bus because they cannot afford a car to subsidize the parking for someone who drives a Mercedes or BMW and shops in Westwood? Do businesses in these areas really believe that the company who runs these garages would charge such a high price for parking that no one would park there? Would those same businesses charge so much for their own goods or services that people wouldn't shop at their store? Allowing the parking garages to be run by a private company removes costs from the city so the city can focus their money on core business functions of the city, like a fire department and police. I urge the City Council to remove artificial constraints from this agreement, this proposal, and allow the market for parking to set the price on these garages. Private corporations will bring capital and expertise that the city needs. Overall services in the garages will improve. Prices will be maintained to keep the garages profitable, and businesses will not lose their customers. I'd like to offer the City Council this brochure, 10 Principles of Privatization, authored by 2 of Reason Foundation's analysts, and the expertise of the Reason Foundation on undertaking this and other privatization efforts. The founder of the Reason Foundation, Bob Poole, wrote the first book on municipal privatization in 1980. We are a nonprofit with experts on this subject and freely offer our help to the city to do it right.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. If Sergeant Arm can collect that from you. Thank you. Arnold Sachs is our next speaker. After that is Pat McCosker.
Thank you. Good morning again, Arnold Sachs. The crux of this problem is the city needs $53 million for this year. We need $53 million again next year. And look at possibly what the expenses are for. Well, there was the pay raise that was authorized because you laid employees off. Instead of lifting the cap on the ERIP, it was conveniently worked out. That came to $30 million. And then you look at the increase requested by the DWP, the 7.7% that they wanted, that they did not get. In lieu of that, they got the Parks and Recreation Department and the libraries to be responsible for their utility costs. That's approximately another $20 million. That's $50 million. Those fees will be here every year. Another pay raise, the cost for that pay raise will be with the city indefinitely. I know last week you had moved like the speed of light to create an ad hoc committee for the new stadium that you want that some poor soul wants to build in downtown LA. So why wasn't ever an ad hoc committee formed for the parking garage or to look into how to raise the expenses, raise the funds that would be necessary? And also, what was it last week? Maybe a little longer. You passed the motion, you had the motion for the CRA to build a parking garage and the art museum as part of the Grand Avenue project, except the museum was never part of the Grand Avenue project, but the parking garage will be bought by the CRA. And isn't it convenient that the CRA has $930 million floating around? So let them invest in the parking garages. They won't even have to pay to build them. They're already there. And they could just refund the money back to the city's general fund that they've been stealing all along.
Our next speaker is Pat McCosker. After that is Victor Gordo.
Morning, members. Pat McCosker, President of United Firefighters. I've been here before, and I've said that I'm not here to advise you as to what you should do with parking garages. I don't know if you should lease them or sell them or keep them or raise prices or any of that. But I certainly know what you need to do regarding public safety, fire and paramedic protection. You know, you decided at the beginning of this budget year that you were going to do this. P3, lease the parking garages and make $53 million and balance the budget that way with a whole bunch of steep cuts, including to our service, closing fire companies, closing ambulances, and this, so the impact wouldn't be greater. It's taken all this time now to get to this point, and now you're being told, you know, it doesn't really pencil out anymore. So take it off the table and let's make deeper cuts. And I know what that means. You know, we already heard the CAO say he wants to close more fire companies when you don't do this. So someone's got to come up with a plan here. Either do this thing now, certainly don't continue to subsidize parking. If you subsidize parking to keep a couple of constituents happy here and there, shoppers and shop owners, what you're saying is that's more important, lingering over your shopping, than providing fire and paramedic protection, police protection. So don't do that. These things need to operate, first of all, at a profit if you're going to keep them and take this off the table. And I'm not suggesting you should. Maybe you ought to lease them and lease them quickly and without any restrictions. But don't continue to erode public safety in this city. Don't lay off workers in this city. You already aren't providing the services. The potholes aren't being filled. The trees aren't being trimmed. The parks are closing. Libraries are closing because of this budget deficit. So do something on this. Maybe it ought to be the redevelopment money that is being grabbed right now. Beat the rush on the redevelopment. We got about $1 billion. Perhaps these parking garages, that's the argument being made, that they're good for the city revenue, redevelopment. Perhaps that money ought to be used on these parking garages. Perhaps they ought to be sold to our fire and police pension system to help pay that debt. There's all kinds of possibilities, but do something other than further reducing public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Victor Gordo is our next speaker. After that is Miriam Fogler in Van Nuys.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the City Council. It appears there are two views of Los Angeles that are being pushed upon you today. One is a very balkanized view of the City of Los Angeles, and another is one city, one people view. We urge you not to take a balkanized view of the City of Los Angeles because that's detrimental to everyone. We're urging you today on behalf of the Coalition of LA City Unions to stand up for all of Los Angeles. That's an important point for all of you to remember as you deliberate this important issue. This issue isn't just about service cuts. The service cuts that the City of Los Angeles and the people of Los Angeles have had to endure have been tremendous and very painful, and we've all seen it at the libraries, we've seen it at the parks, we've seen it on the city streets, we've seen it in every area of this city, throughout the city. And we ask you to also keep in mind that this is about replenishing the reserve for future years. We ask today that you keep in mind the entire City of Los Angeles, that you stand up for the entire City of Los Angeles, and that you take a note from one of your colleagues today and follow the example set by Council Member Smith, who today we celebrated his efforts to stand up for all of the people of Los Angeles by putting forth money to relieve some of the pressure at the jails. And we applaud that effort. That effort will put more police officers on the street today without one single hire of a new police officer, simply by standing up for the entire city and redirecting resources, making better use of resources. There will be 23 or 27 more police officers on the street today. We urge you to follow that example, and we urge you to serve the entire City of Los Angeles. Let's end the balkanized view of the City of Los Angeles and not go along with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. Miriam Fogler is next to Van Nuys. She'll be followed by Donna Pearman.
Mr. Gordo, I hate to say this, but you're right, but you're not hitting the point. It's the CRA's taking all the money, and they put us in this position where our garages now, businesses have to have parking. And if you think that people can just take mass transit like disabled people, they can't. it's going to be very, very difficult. You know, I think there could be a way of working things out. I've seen other cities doing this. So this is just greed, pure greed, what you're doing to the garages. So the redevelopment agency, redevelopment money can come back in. Think of all the money that would help alleviate the problems and get off the backs of furloughing. Now, you did hire too many people in the city, but there was just the right number in some departments, and you can't be picking out on their health care benefit, because people are paying into Medicare $120, $115 a month. So they are paying, at least. That's a lot of money. And, you can't just keep sapping and stealing from the bottom people, the entitlements. You got to go to the root. And that's your projects, your pork barrel projects. You're out of control spending with the redevelopment agency. It's got to stop. And I've been telling you this for the last 30 years. From the days when John Farrell, he laughed at me. He thought I was making a fool of myself. I'll tell you something. God's not going to let you get away with this. And God's not going to let those terrorists get away with what they're doing either. It's murder, what they're doing. And says if you take a life, it's like you're destroying the whole world.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Donna Pearman, also in Van Nuys.
This is Donna. I don't know if anyone's ever been in Westwood over there in the village, and they need the parking over there, and people will go away. They're going away as it is because they can't find parking enough as it is, because you have like one little garage over for a big area, and the people are trying to park on the streets, and they're leaving. And so this destroying the businesses. Businesses are leaving over there in Westwood. We even lost a McDonald's one time. So, the people won't. These places will lose it. If they have only one area where they can go on parking, they are going to lose it. And in the meantime, you give all this money over to the CRA, and I know it's just a matter of time before that $930 million finds its way in the CRA pockets, and the CRA can do his little parking garage over there in the Grand Avenue area. So, there is other ways to get parking done, and who's to say what that money is going to be used for? I don't believe that money is going to go back to help core services. I don't believe it's going to go over there to help the safety.
Let's have public.
Yeah, so let's have public input and allow the public to allow what will be going into this area, because I don't see anything that is going to be coming from leasing these garages, so that those businesses that lease them will get all the money. In the meantime, we're going to go broke, and we're going to have more layoffs, and we're going to have more furloughs, and we're going to have less services done, and we're going to have our streets, our pipes break, because they're on skeleton crew, and because of the CRA. The CRA is the crux of the problem, and unless we do something about the CRA, this little thing with the parking garage is not going to help.
Thank you. We're going to come back to 44 in a second. We have two other speaker cards for other items. 46, if Arnold Sachs would like to come forward. After that, we'll hear public comments on item 56, Peter Repovich.
Yes, thank you again, Arnold Sachs. As I mentioned in my earlier comments regarding the $53 million deficit that the mayor is trying to fill, this funding, would it be available to be used to pay the DWP bill that is now being presented to the Parks and Recreation for the electricity use? How much of that would it cover? And just trying to find out sources of revenue for that. What about, Mr. Wesson had a request or motion that he had made regarding a tax on billboards. What about that as a source of income for these Parks and Recreation programs? Why was that never addressed or considered in the city chambers? I'm just curious to find out about those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Repovich on item 56.
Good morning, Peter Repovich, Los Angeles Police Protective League. Item number 56, back in 1989, Voltaire Williams was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison for conspiracy in the brutal 1985 ambush and assassination of LAPD Detective Thomas C. Williams. As he was picking up his son from a Canoga Park daycare center, Detective Williams was hit by 8 shots fired from an assault weapon. His truck was riddled with bullets, as were nearby walls and even the interior of a school. The killing or attempted killing of law enforcement officer is the ultimate attack on public safety. Fellow law enforcement officers, Angelenos, and concerned citizens across the state and nation must send the message that brazen attacks like these will result in the harshest penalties and will always mean a lifetime forfeiture of the assailant's freedom. We hope that the City Council will join Councilmember Zine and honor the memory of Detective Williams and support his wife and 2 children by informing the parole board to make Voltaire Williams serve out his full sentence. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Zine on this item?
Thank you, Mr. President. On item number 56, thank you, Mr. Pete Repovich from the Police Protective League. We talk about public safety. We talk about our concern for law enforcement. And this was a premeditated, vicious attack on this detective who was handling the case. And as this detective left work to go pick up his son at the daycare center, he was followed and ultimately assassinated by an individual who now wants to come back and prey on society. And talk about a disservice to a community. If we don't support this resolution, we're telling a criminal element, premeditated murder, you can go out and kill a police officer in front of his son and then get out of prison. This man needs to do his full time. I believe he should have gotten the death penalty for the act that he perpetrated. But this young man, the son who I've spoken with, still has trauma for this tragedy. And it is with saddened heart that I bring this before us for this resolution. And I remember the day that happened because I was working LAPD, and I remember that specific situation where it was a case in Van Nuys Court. The detective went to pick up his son from daycare, and he was assassinated with an assault weapon, and I believe it was an AK-47, multiple rounds. We have a captain from the LAPD here who give him a couple moments to speak on this particular situation, but I would hopefully think that this council would be unanimous in supporting this resolution on this particular matter.
Kevin McCarthy, Detective Bureau. Good morning. I think that the circumstances have been adequately described. I mean, that day in 1985, October 31st, when Ryan, Detective Williams' son, should have been out trick-or-treating, he was mourning the loss of his dad. That day was not only a nightmare for the Los Angeles Police Department and Detective Williams' family, it was also a nightmare for the city of Los Angeles. So Los Angeles Police Department thanks Mr. Zine and supports the motion.
Thank you, Cap. So, Mr. President, I would encourage us to all support this with a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Mr. Smith.
Just a brief statement. I knew Tom Williams fairly well, and it was interesting just the 6 months before he was assassinated, he had received an award from my predecessor, Councilman Bernson, as being the outstanding detective in the Valley that year. He was a good man, and the real tragedy was his son witnessed his assassination. His son saw it. His little boy saw that happen. And so in my friendship with Tom Williams, my recognition of his service, I couldn't ask for anything greater. Thank you, Dennis, for bringing it forward. We must do this, and we must stand up for our police officers who put their lives on the line literally every day. Tom gave the ultimate sacrifice for us, and it continues to this day for all of us who knew him. So in his memory, I support this motion. I ask all of us to do so.
Thank you. Let's prepare the roll on this.
And, Mr. President, there is a substitute resolution that was circulated.
Yes, with a substitute, and please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
As approved, we'll send that forthwith. Thank you. Mr. Rosendahl for an introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We have from Deutschland a group of students with two professors from the University of Kiel in Germany. Wie geht's? Stand up so that we can have you on the camera. Sehr gut. It's meine Mutter, meine Vater from Deutschland. And now we're going to go in the back and talk. This is our beautiful City Hall, and we're happy to welcome you here to the City of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Willkommen. Thank you very much. And if we can move item 59, please. I think we had those questions addressed. Item 59, the closed session. We'll do an open session.
And the recommendation is to reject the settlement offer in the case of Richard Romney versus City.
Okay, please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That's approved. Item 46, if we can take a vote on now as well. Please prepare the roll on 46 and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved as well. And we'll return to item 44. And Mr. Parks was our first speaker in the queue for item number 44. We will be going into closed session on it as well. Mr. Parks, do you want to make any open session comments, Mr. Parks? You were on the queue for 44. Did you want to say some open session things before we go into closed session? I have some open session comments as well.
Two things. One, we have the open session before we go to closed session.
Yes.
But I also think it would be helpful for the council to hear item 63 before we get all the information in closed session, just to understand where the budget is and the revenue sources.
Okay, there's some members of the public. If you don't mind, let's do the open session 44 stuff. We can go to 63 and then we'll go into closed session. So the council will be able to hear that, but I want to be respectful of those folks that are just here for 44. So do you want to give any open session 44?
We can hear the open session first.
Okay.
If not, a public comment.
We've done the public comment, but I wanted to say some things in public session on 44. Did you want to wait to closed session? Then
I'll just make a couple of comments.
Go ahead, please.
Colleagues, on this issue, we have been struggling with it for over 4 years. We had a discussion on this item at the beginning of this year's budget, where we discussed whether these funds should even be put in the budget. Subsequently, we've now moved forward to where over the life of the current budget, in just the first 7 months, we've had to go out and find the $53 million that didn't exist. The other issue is we're now confronted on item 63 with even additional shortfalls in our revenue, which means that there is an even larger deficit that we're going to be confronted with. No matter what we consider about P3, it will not come forward to help us at all this year. And there's still a debate as to whether if different council offices have concerns about adding different variations onto their particular lot, whether there will ever be a viable plan to move forward on. I would hope that as we move forward that we would consider, much as what they've done at the airport, to put together a plan to create the lots as a revenue generator. There's $85 million a year that comes into airport lots because an outside manager manages them, they advertise them, they basically are able to fluctuate the rates. Our lots that we're talking about operate at about a 40% level. If we're going to consider moving them in the hands of someone else that are beyond our control, I would hope that we would realize that the 60% margin that would go into their hands should come into the city's hands if we properly manage them. So as part of item 63 today, there's a recommendation to address that. I think we've exhausted every known type of evaluation on this item, and I think we've spent upwards of a couple of $1 million in that assessment. I just don't know whether we can continue down a path of spending money on a project that's taken 4 years not to hatch and then move forward and continue spending more money on the likelihood that one day it might become a reality. So I would hope that as we hear the item, understand what the bidders came back with, what their concerns were, that they're no different than what the city CAO told us early on. The more limitations you place on the project, the more limitations you put on them as to raise their ability to raise money, the more that they're going to find that our dollar value is eliminated. We had thought early on that we would get sufficient money to eliminate the debt service, and then able to invest some of that money into our infrastructure, our reserve fund. It appears from really the last time, this money and the lots would disappear within 1 year. You would use up the money almost immediately, and then secondly, the lots would be gone for 50 years. And the last version I saw is that they wanted to have some competition rules that we could not build within a certain distance of the existing lots to compete with them, which we'd have to project over 50 years from now, just where and what we'd be doing on our development in our city. So I'd hope that we could quietly put this to rest so we can move forward on the real issue of the budget. We're going to have some very, very serious decisions to make at the mid-year, as you see as coming forward, because the intent is to try to close down the growing $60 to $70 million deficit this year and address some of the $350 next year during the mid-year. So that's where we should be placing our attention, not on some of the issues that have been brought to us in the past, whether we're going to get $60 million from the new foreclosure law that didn't come about, whether we're going to go out and find hundreds of million dollars on uncollected debt that we didn't find. This is another one of those issues that we need to move forward and begin to concentrate on the real issues of the budget.
Mr. Garcetti is next. Mr. Rosendahl, do you have a quick comment before Mr. Garcetti?
I just wanted, for the record, to let people know that the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates Group held a meeting this morning, and I've gotten phone calls and emails clearly suggesting don't go forward with selling, but most of them are saying real clear we should lease it, we should have a business plan that brings in a revenue stream. I just, for the record, wanted to let people know that that's been their position.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you. And thank you. I wanted to say some things in open session for the council, for the public, for friends that are here, both urging us to move forward and those who are not. And I'd ask, as a second speaker, for the full 6 minutes, Mr. President. I appreciate that this is a stressful moment for all of us because of the budget and because of the economy that we're in. But I also want to lay out that as we look at this, that we have to also steer through a lot of the myths and a lot of the queuing up where people are saying, oh, just do this or don't do this at all, of what I think is a responsible course. But let me first kind of destroy a few myths that are out there. Myth number one is that the changes that were made in our private deliberations are somehow poison pills. They're not poison pills. I think they're protective principles for our budget. If we seek not just short term, but in the medium term to have revenues in this city, if this was just about, with all due respect to my friends in Hollywood, who I do feel that I need to protect, but if I felt that they were wrong and they were at the expense of the city doing something just for Hollywood, I would stand up and tell them that. But if we are looking at trying to balance a budget by continuing to bring revenues into this city, and I'll get to a second myth in a second that relates to this, we need to make sure that there are certain principles of economic development and urban planning that are protected in a given neighborhood so that Hollywood can continue to produce money for the city of Los Angeles. Because if we were not doing that, then the firefighters and our civilian workers that are here urging us to do this, and I've been, I hope, a strong voice in keeping this process going because it's been worth exploring. We passed a budget, by the way, that didn't say we would do this. We passed a budget saying we would look into seeing how much money we could get from this, and if we didn't, that there was a balanced budget and a separate plan to move forward on cuts. That's the budget we passed, just to remind everybody. But the idea that these are somehow poison pills that were inserted, I've heard from the most ardent or the most eager folks who want to see a deal get done when you explain the idea, for instance, that in Hollywood we could have the need for 5,000 parking places and one company we would have to pay, just like the Chicago deal, to be able to build a second garage, let's say to accommodate a new hotel or something else like that. We'd be taking money out of our general fund to pay, which it means closing down fire stations and cutting off the services. And we also might actually, if we didn't do that, strangle the very goose that lays the golden egg in terms of economic development. Myth number two, that we subsidize parking. Now that sounds kind of controversial, but we keep hearing this over and over again, that it's a few maybe wealthy people or shoppers that are somehow subsidizing parking at the expense of other things. So, this isn't hypothetical. We actually had a time when we didn't subsidize parking. Let me take one garage. We took the Hollywood and Highland garage. We didn't subsidize parking the first year. We charged $10 for people parking there. And guess what? We actually had to pay more in to pay off the debt, the bond, than we do today by charging $2. Let me repeat that. when we had higher prices at Hollywood and Highland, let the market just take its own rate. We brought less revenue into the city, and it was a bigger drain on our budget than it is today. Part of the reason I successfully got this council to peg it at $2, and I've been open and we've talking and we're moving towards, we know can't stay at 2, but it's something reasonable, is because it earns the city more money. It may be less than the expenses, but there's two ways of looking at what subsidy is. There's the subsidy of what our cost is, and yes, we do have a small subsidy there in almost all of our garages. But there's also the subsidy of how much from our general fund we have to pay in to pay those bonds off if we don't do that. So we're stuck between subsidizing a little and subsidizing a lot. Not some dreamland where somehow we're not going to subsidize at all. And by the way, it's not related to the quote-unquote poison pills on this. For Hollywood, for the record, we can't go into great detail, but I think we can say this. I inserted nothing, Mr. LeBon's inserted nothing that changed the pricing structure. It's the same as all of the rest of the garages for the rest of the city. That was not some sort of poison pill inserted. Myth number 3, there is this myth out there that if somehow we did strip this out of all these quote-unquote changes that were put in, that we would get enough money to meet the $53 million. We will talk to our advisors in private session, but let me say in public session that I've talked to them numerous times, and they can correct me if I'm wrong. They do not believe, I've talked privately with our CLA and CAO, and I think they would say this on the record, that even if we stripped out all those things today, that there is a net of $53 million. Maybe it's close to getting somewhere there, best case scenario, but we keep getting wildly inflated estimates from certain quarters of how much money this is actually worth. Now, you and I, we both said, well, let's just try, let's just see. And we could. It'll take us 6 more weeks. We can go out to the market and prove ourselves to be wrong. But I also listen to people who do this for a living when they're saying, you've got to be realistic about what these numbers are. So myth number 3 is that somehow we strip these out, hey, we're in the money and we've closed the deficit for this year. That also is going to happen. But myth number 4 is the idea that then we are stuck between either stripping this out, hoping, some miracle happens and somebody decides to overpay for these garages, or starting to lay off and furlough people tomorrow. I think that there are other alternatives that we can look at that get to the heart of protecting our communities, that get to the heart of the services that we provide, and I've been putting them out there privately and publicly with folks. They've been mentioned by a couple of our public comment speakers. In the Hollywood CRA area, and remember, folks, over 60% of these are in my district, and I'm willing, and I think Hollywood is willing, to pay its fair share to help the rest of the city in a moment like this, because the rest of the city helped Hollywood when we got these built. That's a fair exchange. Why not use our CRA money in Hollywood to pay off the debt, or as much of the debt as we can with the remaining amount there, and wind down the Hollywood redevelopment area, as long as we get some things like a parking district that we've talked about for the signage and make it easy for people to get in and out. Now that we've been successful in redeveloping Hollywood, and redevelopment money has done that, what could be more important to keeping that going than making sure that there's reasonable parking there? 2, why, by the way, all the potential bidders of these are mostly funded by pension money outside of L.A. Why not accept the ability for people here in the city of L.A., our pensions, to get that rate of return from our parking garages if we do want to somehow securitize them? It would give us some assurances that those rates could be kept low, that we could control that. It would be kept inside the city family, and it would save us money this year because we wouldn't pay out of the general fund to subsidize our pensions this year. 3rd, we could look at selling off one or more of the garages. Interestingly enough, for everybody who thinks that it's the Hollywood business community trying to protect some sort of subsidy, I think there's strong support in Hollywood for the potential sale of the Hollywood and Highland garage to somebody who would be in the area and interested in keeping rates low. That would be the market working at its best, and that could happen. I've put these things out there. I can't do that as a council office. Those are things that require our CLA, our CAO, our departments, our mayor's office to actually work on them. But I put that out there because, folks, I don't want to be jammed between a position today of saying, well, you're only a bad person if you don't move forward with something that is increasingly seeming like it's impossible and probably unwise. And the other option of being, well, you're just going to have to lay off and furlough people. We have to hustle to look at those other options, see what we can do to get those done, and in the meantime, make sure that these principles that are not for Hollywood or Westwood, but actually for the entire city treasury, which is the whole point of what P3 was about. The mayor put this proposal forward, I believe, to balance this year's budget. Next year's budget, the budget after that, the budget after that. If we don't have economic development in certain areas, if we don't have the ability to even build in the future, then we successfully got through 3 months and tanked ourselves for another decade.
Mr. Cardenas is the only other speaker on the queue.
Thank you. I'll try to speak within my 3 minutes. when it comes to this, which is now coined as P3, I've said consistently and constantly in committees when this comes up, on the floor of the council, wherever I go, that this is not a good idea, period. Now, what the market has told us is that they're not hungry for this idea, at least the way it's been proposed. I read the letter that the mayor put out on Valentine's Day, February 14th, just a couple days ago, and it was a letter that basically said that the council messed up this whole great idea, and because they put some exemptions in it or took off the one in Westwood or whatever the heck we did that day, that's the main reason why we did not get any responses to our request to the third market to go ahead and take over our parking garages. Well, I would say publicly that the mayor is inaccurate. That didn't make a bad idea a good idea bad. That just made a bad idea continue to be just a bad idea. What we need to do, council members, for the sake of the people who pay taxes in the city, for the people who elect us, is what we need to do is we need to be honest with them and also the people who work for the city, and just be honest and say, let's do real budgeting. If we have a $50 million budget shortfall this year, but it's not a one-time shortfall, that shortfall is going to continue next year and the next year and the next, why are we going to sell off hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets, or lease them for 50-plus years for a one-time shot in the arm? All we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, just be right back to the same place we were last year and this year, and it's going to be deja vu. We're going to have to find another $50 million. And guess what? We just turned over some of our assets that perhaps if we used them much better, we would actually have that asset to help out our economic situation. So the bottom line is this: we can beat this dead horse over and over and over again, but I would say let's just move on. Let's call this what it is. It's not a good idea. It's not being fiscally responsible. And we have a glaring example in Chicago, where they did something similar. And they got a lot more money for their lease out of 75 years of their parking garages and their parking meters. They actually had $1 billion to play with, $1 billion to work with as a result of that particular transaction. And what happened to that money? They're back to exactly where they were before they turned over 75 years of their assets in the city of Chicago. Why in the world would we want to duplicate that action? Why in the world would we keep going down that road? It's a bad idea. It doesn't make any sense. We should have never put this as part of this budget plan, and now we're back to where we knew we were going to be, which is we have to figure out where to get $50 million or cut $50 million out of the budget. This is a terrible idea. We should just kill it once and for all.
Well, now we have Ms. Hahn and Mr. Garcetti once again.
Thank you. It's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate that we are at this point. And it's unfortunate we've spent, a lot of money trying to put this deal together. And now it just doesn't seem to make sense. And for me, and I think Councilmember Garcetti, you really laid it out. I mean, and I think that's, for me, I want to figure out how to not furlough more, have more furlough days for our employees, or lay off our employees, because I think that's key. And if I had to vote for people over concrete, I mean, of course, I would do that every time. But the way you've laid this out just does not seem to make sense anymore. Mr. Garcetti brought up some ideas that made sense, some ideas that would, help us balance this budget. Why aren't we exploring those more aggressively? Why haven't we already explored those more aggressively? And the other thing that came clear to me during this whole discussion of our parking garages, city doesn't do a good job managing these assets. So, okay, we're not going to sell them, but are we just going to keep them and continue to run them the way we've run them? I think we have an opportunity here to run them better, run them more efficiently, get the revenue that we should be getting, working with our business community to make this really profitable for all of us. I mean, we certainly, don't want to kill economic development by raising rates or running these, inefficiently, but we have a great opportunity here. So I got to tell you, colleagues, I'm disappointed that we're at this spot, that we spent so much money trying to put this deal together. It doesn't make sense. There's some good ideas that Councilmember Garcetti brought up. Are we aggressively pursuing those? And what are we going to do to manage these assets better? So, we take it off the table forever that we're going to get rid of them. Why can't these be really valuable assets for the city of Los Angeles for the next 50 years? And are we going to see in detailed form how we're going to do it better and more efficiently in the future? It's just unfortunate. And by the way, Mr. Garcetti, I thought we voted for, this in our budget. I thought we voted for this $53 million. So what are we going to do to fill that $53 billion? What are we going to do to make these more efficient? And what are we going to do to make sure that we're not going to add furlough days and lay off our more employees? This concerns me very much. What do you guys have to say for yourselves?
Well, item 44 is a communication from myself and Mr. Miller regarding the state of this issue and also recommending a series of reductions worth $60 million. As a reminder, your council, over a period of well over 30 days, has cut that in half. Adopted half of those recommendations and reduced the deficit that we knew at the time on January 5th in half. What we unfortunately are seeing, and that's related to item 63, is we're seeing a drop in revenue this year of approximately $25 million. So while we've cut the deficit in half, we just got it added on in a very short period of time due to that drop, and so we're back to about a $50 million shortfall or slightly beyond that. What I stated in my communication related to the P3 is that I indicated it on January 5th, and I made it clear in the latest communication that irregardless of how your council decides to move forward on this issue today, whether it decides to move forward on it with no restrictions to maximize value, I think it's very difficult, if not impossible, to try to receive this revenue this fiscal year. You should all have in front of you the schedule that looks like this on the process that's involved to complete this with the remaining time that we have. It assumes that your council takes action today and that we provide instructions to the departments that are needing to provide additional data requested by the bidders immediately. We're allowing 2 weeks for them to respond. Normally, we would have waited until the day we receive that information because we know that this is specific information that the bidders have requested. But because we're trying to fast-track this, we're going to go ahead and release the RFP on February 23 and provide them that supplemental information in the middle of this process. We're expecting to have the proposals due on April 6th. In between that time, we began the best and final offer process, and we also need the CRA, the Parks Department, Parks Department to adopt these recommendations before their respective boards. We also need the city attorney to complete its title work, and then during this period is when the bidders are putting their financing together to complete this process. Normally, that's a 90-day process. That's an industry standard process. And so if we assume that industry standard process, we're talking about July 18th. Now, we could try and work as hard as we can to try to meet the June 30th deadline. okay? But we know going in that based on even an expedited schedule, it would be very, very difficult. And particularly not just for us and everything that we have to do on our end, but it would be difficult for the bidders to put the financing together to complete it within the time frame that we're requiring. So the position that we have, I mean, in relation to the P3, that will be a discussion that we'll have in closed session. But as it relates to this year's budget, which goes to the question that you asked me, Ms. Hahn, we currently have a $50 million problem that we need to resolve. Your council has adopted many very difficult decisions, and given the short time frame that we're in, the decisions become that much more difficult. And so furloughs are the only way that we could guarantee actual revenue to help mitigate that shortfall. And there's maybe a handful of other things, taking what's remaining from the SPRF, which is about $3 million, and the portion related to the Parks Department. Those pieces get us maybe $15 to $20 million. So we're still short. Our reserve fund is what we relied on last year to end the year in the black. And so it's looking as though we're going to have to rely on the reserve fund again this year to do so. Our reserve fund today is about $280 million. 220 of it is the emergency reserve, which should the ballot measure pass in March, I'm sorry, 100 million? 180. No, I'm sorry, 180 million, I apologize. 180 million of it. And our total reserve fund is 180, not 280, I'm sorry. 120 million of it is the emergency reserve fund. So that leaves about 60 million left of flexibility beyond the emergency reserve fund. So, you know, the flexibility we have is much more challenging.
Mr. Wesson, followed by Mr. LeBon.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. You know, I have no problems whatsoever in selling the parking lots or leasing them, because I think we as a city have to reinvent ourselves, and we need to get rid of the things that we don't do well. With that said, however, in order for us to lease or sell, it needs to pencil out for us. And at this point in time, it doesn't appear that that is going to be the case. So I don't understand why we will go through it. Now, I'm not prepared and won't vote on furloughs or layoffs or anything like that. I, as Janice, you know, put our employees above concrete, but it would be ill-advised for us to do this deal if it doesn't make money for us. It just is what it is. I also stand to say that I would suggest we just reject this. I don't see the need to go into closed session. If the votes are here to reject it, I think that that's what we do, and I think that's what we do now. Then we go back to the drawing board and we figure out how we're going to get our, you know, selves out of this hole. But to me, it just doesn't. There's no value in it. At one point, I was talking to Council President Garcetti, and I said, well, maybe we just send this out anyway, eliminate everything, send it out, and see what comes back, and maybe it comes back less than the, you know, money we... But that really doesn't make any sense if the information that we're receiving from you would lead us to believe that that's not the case. So if we do that, we're wasting time, wasting a little money, wasting effort, whereas we should just, you know, reject this now and begin coming up with a way as to how we're going to move forward. So I would suggest, members, that we just take, you know, I don't see the need to go into closed session when I believe, if I've counted correctly, the vote would be to... So with that, do I need to make a motion or something?
Were you making a motion on that?
Yes. I need a second.
Is there a second?
Second by Ms. Hahn, and the motion is, Mr. Wesson?
That we would just reject, you know, let's start all over. Let's, you know, get rid of the concept of P3 for now, and then come back with other ways in which we could move forward.
Okay, so your motion is to shelve P3 process, seconded by Ms. Hahn.
I got 7 seconds, so we already got 8 votes.
You got, I see you have 11 seconds left, but we'll put that in the bank for you. Mr. Labange, followed by Mr. Garcetti, then Mr. Rosendahl.
Mr. CAO, this key revenue trends, parking citations are down. Why are citations down, do you think?
It's basically we're going through the information, we've been working with DOT and to assess why citations are down. There's could be various reasons. One is, we've increased rates. We've actually increased, changed out heads, so there's better, collection. As people pay more, they're less likely to take risks as far as parking. And we'll have to go over this in more detail when we go through our revenue. We're surprised. We're surprised by that too, and
So there's probably compliance. I know at least from some neighborhoods that I look at the sweeper tracks, I don't see any sweeper tracks around parked cars, and I see that people are complying because I think it's not the $58 ticket or whatever it is for street cleaning is significant. I don't know if the Tiger teams are less the Tiger now because of the enforcement, and it's a stiff fine, so some of the things are. These modern meters, which there's 10,000 in the city, do you know what they're generating?
The revenue's up on that.
I believe this discussion should be limited to the P3 parking lot
I'm sorry,
discussion.
Mr. City Attorney was just dropped to me, and I thought it was there, but it had to do with parking. On the parking issue, too, let me ask you a question. Have any of these, looking with a urban planner, are any of these parking structures standalone that you would see that if we sold it, what would it be? Just sold it. Just said we sold it.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on what we would generate, but I think the discussion that's been had about the operations and other ways of dealing with and better managing our parking garage is something that's worth doing. I mean, there were several reasons to consider this that have surfaced even stronger in this process. One is the fact that we owe on these garages and that the revenue on meters and the revenue on the garages are directly linked to that debt. So if we ever plan on doing something different with that revenue or using that revenue in a maximizing it, we have to get out of that debt burden. The second thing is that exploring other alternatives, and particularly placing them under private hands, irregardless of the P3, will generate property taxes on those lots that we currently do not get.
I asked the CAO, speaking of property taxes, it was a previous CAO, but because of the land acquisition by LA Unified, a number of parcels were taken off the rolls. Is that a significant number? And I'm all for LA Unified and building schools, but a significant amount of land. I mean, members, this is something that has taken place. I don't know if you ever got that answer, but there's a significant amount of land has moved from private rolls to the public. I'm interested in solving our problem, as all of us are, but I'm not interested in losing in the future. I'm disappointed in my interpretation of what I felt the structure of a budget must be as our plan for 2010, 2011. And we're accounting for one big thing to happen, and the one thing didn't happen. So I will continue this discussion, but I want to look for an answer that gives us a better solution than the one that we have now.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Reyes, followed Mr. Garcetti, Mr. Rosendahl, and then Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Council President. For every action, there's a reaction, correct? So we have a proposal now, a motion that says we start all over again. But to do that means we have to take other actions to deal with that gap. And that goes back to your other advice when you started isolating other areas in the city budget that we needed to cut, correct? Now, and maybe that's why we needed to go to a closed session, maybe not, I don't know. But is there a summary
So it's clear that we understand that there is going to be a consequence to this action. Do we start going to furloughs immediately? Do we start cutting down departments immediately? There's a gap there that we needed to fill. And if we follow your timeline, it's obviously it's not going to be in time. It takes us out to July. So can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what the consequences are of our actions?
Well, as I indicated at the beginning, your council has adopted $30 million worth of cuts of the $60 million that we recommended. The things that are remaining are additional furlough days, and there's anywhere between 5 and 8 furlough days that could potentially still be imposed in addition to the ones employees are facing. We still have $3 million in the SPRF fund that could be taken. Currently, the requirement is that it be done as a loan. I will recommend that be suspended. And there are still funds in the Parks Department that your council has not moved forward on that could also still be achieved this fiscal year. And perhaps we could find a few other things that we could do. Beyond that, it becomes very challenging because we're in a very short period of time. I've been instructed by the mayor, Councilman Garcetti, Smith, and others, Mr. Parks, to come back in the mid-year financial status report with sort of much deeper round of cuts for next year. And if you recall, we went through this process last year.
Right.
And it was sort of a way of addressing many of these reductions prior to the budget, and we intend to do that. And so my staff has been working very hard to put that list together. That's going to be anywhere between $100 and $200 million worth of cuts for a full fiscal year.
Okay.
Going through that list, it's very hard to see many of those things actually generating much revenue the remainder of this fiscal year.
Okay, just in closing, there was a point in time, maybe 3 months ago or 2 months ago, where we were, if I recall correctly, we were essentially evening out. We weren't going any further down, but in this latest report, we have a $25 million dip.
That is correct, and we basically are seeing them in a handful of areas. We're seeing it in the utility tax, and that's in part because we had a mild summer, and also because a lot of folks are canceling their landlines instead of, and just using their cell phone. Currently, they pay a utility tax on both. The second area that we're seeing a reduction is in interdepartmental receipts internally. There's a handout that walks you through most of those areas.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Garcetti, followed by Mr. Rosendahl, then Ms. Hahn.
And, Mr. President, I'm happy to press my button another time after this, but colleagues, I think there's a number of things, even if we're moving towards a direction I think we are, to put on the record that I think are really important considering the amount of time that we've put here. Just one last word on this year's budget. This year's budget said that we would try. We didn't say that we would try at any cost, no matter what the bids were, no matter how unrestricted or restricted it was to pass something. We said we would try, and it said that specifically. And in fact, the Budget Committee put in there that if it didn't come through, because we weren't sure, and we've gone through this before, whether it was the mangrove properties or other things, we know sometimes our one-time expectations don't always come through. There's all sorts of contingency things that can happen, that we would have backup plans for what to do on that. It wasn't exactly the same mirror of what we said the backup plans to be, but our work that we did last few weeks in cutting another $15 million, $30 million reflected our ability to do that while we were waiting, because we said there might be delays and some unanticipated things. I want to establish, so I think, what we said that we would, and I hope we all are using this as our prism, is that we will do what's best for our budget. Putting a bad deal in may not be what's best for our budget. in terms of sustaining our city's economic engine. We'll get to that in a second, but there are three things, I think, to summarize that have framed this today. One is the time that this would take. The CAO has already walked through it, so I won't ask him to put that back on the record. I think that's pretty straightforward. Our advisors, with a simple nod, think that's a realistic time frame. Anything more is probably unrealistic? Okay. Secondly, and I'd ask our advisors actually to come forward, if you don't mind, to the table. And while you're coming up, I'll go to the third one. This is time, the amount, and the effect. The time frame looks like we can't get it by the end of the year, but one could argue, well, we should maybe still do this if it's going to produce some money because it's going to help us for next year. So let's look then at the amount. I'd like our advisors to say on the record what their opinion is, and I know that this is a subjective question, but in your opinion, were we to strip, quote-unquote, everything away from this, is it your belief that the marketplace would embrace a net on this? Maybe the CLA can help us, or CAO, on the overall, what would the gross, to net 53, the gross offer would have to be what, again? Or maybe you guys remember, what is it,
I'm sorry, what was Gary Hall, JP Morgan?
For the city to net $53 million, which is what we plugged into our budget, what would the gross bid have to be on all the parking lots? Because most of it's, of course, going to pay down debt.
It's between 185 and 190.
Okay. Do you believe if we went to the market with the quote-unquote stripped-away version, which we still have to assess whether that's a smart thing to do, that's my next piece, do you believe that it is probable that we will get $53 million or above? Net.
Should this matter be a closed session matter, sir?
If you advise me to, then we can go into closed session. But I've already established on the record that I have heard that may be low. I think the difficulty here is I know there may be folks that would bid on that, but for us to not waste their time and not to waste ours, that is a critical piece of information. So we can do that in close if that's everyone's collective advice, but I don't know. I mean, I think we're headed towards a pretty clear direction here, and it's partially based on that advice privately that for folks not even at this table, let me put it that way, that I have heard who work in this area saying that it's not realistic for us to be netting $100 million or as high as some of the numbers we've heard out there. Is that in this marketplace?
I would strongly advise you not to have this discussion in open session.
Point taken. So we maybe can go in closed session. Folks want to hear that. I will put that out there on the record. But the public does deserve to know that, because then folks who really want this to happen come to us and say, hey, you could have gotten the $53 million. And they need to know what the marketplace is. I'll leave that correct. So time, amount, and then effect. This is for the CLA. As our advisors relax into the backs of the chairs. The effect of this, for the CLA, don't think about Council District 13 and Council District 4 for a second, Council District 5. Is the effect of moving forward with stripping everything out, is this something you would advise the council to do in terms of the economic impact? Let's say if we put in something that said, whoever gets the Hollywood and Highland garage and the ArcLight Cinema garage and the Westwood garage, that no other city involvement in building even a private garage could ever happen for the next 5 decades. What is your advice that you would give to us from an effect of what this does to our budget? I know the urban planning policy side of things, which is not very wise, but would we in any way, in your opinion, hurt our city budget in the medium term?
Well, we could. And to be clear, and from my perspective, going back to the beginning on this, although some people have asserted it, this has never been about getting the most money we could possibly get from the garages. This has always been about seeing whether or not a privatization, a public-private partnership within the policy constraints that this council needs to have for its communities is going to get us sufficient money. So if a deal goes forward that is not in the interest of the community, both financially and from a policy standpoint, it could impact our budget on the long run. As has been discussed here, there are things that can be done to increase revenues at these garages. There are things that can be done to improve the management of these garages. So it really comes down to whether or not the structure of this, from a policy standpoint, is something you can support. And I would not advise you to put forward a deal that has no policy restrictions in it. That's exactly what Chicago did. And from the very beginning on this deal, for the last 2.5 years, the council's been very clear about wanting to think this through and put forward something that's in the interest of the community, and not simply put something out there to get the most money without understanding the implications.
In your mind, if we said this myth of the era of quote-unquote subsidized parking is over, and we took some of these main garages, let's say Pershing Square, let's say Hollywood and Highland, ArcLight, and saw those rates go up to what we experienced in 2002, do you think that we would have less debt on those garages, that we would net more money on them? Is it your opinion?
Could we net more money through improved operations?
No, not through better operations. If we, again, this idea out there that somehow, the one main criticism that remains of this is that somehow there are people who are getting subsidized parking at the expense of public services. Okay? That the cheap cost of the parking somehow takes away from our libraries, our fire stations, our parks, etc. If we were to go up, let's say, to what we had in 2002 of $8, $10, because, by the way, I've never opposed, for the record, yet again, increasing the rates to keep pace with inflation. I've had straightforward conversation with the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. It's not going to stay at $2 forever. We should probably be at $3. We should be looking at modernizing the validation. But that said, if we went up to a high amount, is there a point at which it becomes a larger drain on our budget? If we were to recoup the quote-unquote full cost of running the garage?
Absolutely. If the garages are not, if you're not charging market rate on the garages, if you're overcharging, then it is going to hurt the garages, and we did see that in Hollywood Highland.
Let me make a motion then to conclude and then ask a final question of our CAO and CLA just to lay it out as straight as we can. My motion is to not give up, though, because it takes, I think, a lot more than this to knock us down, certainly knock me down on trying to figure out a way to do this short of putting this on the backs of our already furloughed, already laid off, already cut employees. The motion is to ask the CLA and CAO, who I know have initiated, but I want to do this formally, to look at the three other options that I put forward, that where Hollywood would actually step up and try to do its part to help save the city by looking at CRA, whether they could buy down the debt in the Hollywood area of those three garages. Secondly, to explore whether we could structure a deal with our own pension funds that would give some protection or some relief from what we would have to give to those pension funds this year in lieu of our normal general fund obligation. And three, the sale of individual garages and what we would need to, get for those for you to be able to move forward. And if this deal does not move forward today, that we're ready putting that in place right away. And then the fourth thing that I'd add is the motion. We are already working on some of the maximization of the profitability of these. So we have a good DOT general manager who's working on that. But I think this group and the public should hear what those are. The modernization and validation at Hollywood and Highland, proposed rate increases if this deal doesn't go. And I don't mean big ones, but to keep pace with inflation. Everybody's going to have to sacrifice a little. The era of being as cheap as it is may be over, not the end of subsidized parking, because for the reasons Mr. Miller just put out, and to ask for a report back from our DOT of what is being done on the operations side to maximize that profit. And then my last question to ask you both, is it your advice to move forward with this deal, stripping away all of the additions, the protections today? CAO and CLA.
No.
It goes back to what your goal is. If your goal is to maximize the value of these assets, then the answer is yes. If your goal is to, but again, it goes to at what cost. And there are many policy implications to that cost. And the question is whether it's worth that cost to all of us. And so that's what the policy decision is before you. It's a threshold question. And I would recommend that one or the other be decided today. Because at the end of the day, we still have a budget problem that we need to solve. And to the extent that this remains an option, without any real effort to, or without crossing that threshold, then it's a distraction from having to resolve that budget.
Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Parks, Ms. Hahn, Ms. Perry? Somebody's...
second to my motion to look at the other options.
We have a second?
Thank you, Mr.
We have a second. Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosendahl, then Ms.
Thank
Perry
you.
and Ms. Hahn.
Look, folks, I appreciate our candor here in the room, but I agree with Ms. Hahn. These furloughs are a disaster, because some of the people furloughed are the people that collect money for us in various ways, be it the street sweepers. And Bill Robertson told me yesterday that he's got a ton of money sitting there from gas tax that he's not allowed to use to keep these workers back, which will generate more money. So I really think, as Mr. Cardenas said, the structural changes issue have to be brought forward at this point. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to support this anymore. I'm going to be with Mr. Weston on this. My communities have spoken clearly. It is a fireside sale, no matter how you look at it at this point. Everybody who knows anything about money and business knows that the squeeze that has been happening over this issue, we are at the end of our road and put it behind us. I think those budget advocates from the neighborhood councils are pretty clear, like every one of my constituents. It's a fireside sale at the worst of times. What we should do with all of our parking lots is turn it over to a management team that isn't city workers who understand parking lots and generate revenue from those parking lots for us. When Jerry Brown, a liberal of some sort or another, says he ain't going to sell those government buildings anymore, I think that set a tone that's different than where we all have been in the past. Frankly, it's time to put this behind us, take Mr. Weston's motion and vote yes on it, and stop talking about this issue. Bring in the general managers of these departments that have great ideas that they've shared with me, and if we get rid of some of these furloughs, we will generate more money. To see DOT furloughing people, that ticket people, that bring in a revenue stream, or street services that go out and sweep the streets, that also generate money when they see that a car hasn't been parked, is shooting ourselves in the foot. So the original fellow in the room, who's retiring now, Greg Smith, made this point a long time ago, and many of us couldn't buy into it because we just felt that this was the right way to go. So we live and we learn. Let's support Mr. Weston's motion, get it behind us, and do some structural discussions on where we go from here. Thank you.
Ms. Perry, following Ms. Hahn, then Mr. Parks.
I just wanted to ask a clarification on Mr. Garcetti's motion. Did you meant that instead of continuing on, right? So, because I am of the mind that we need to stop this P3, and so you're recommending a whole other set of options to explore, and it was separate and apart and not a part of what is on the table now. Because we do need to stop, we need to move on. We're wasting time.
Ms. Hahn, followed by Mr. Parks.
I'd also like, as a part of this report, to get back, I want to report back on the losses from canceling parking enforcement at locations where the street sweeping has been halted due to furloughs, whether it's the folks that fix the street sweepers or whatever, because I understand that's a revenue loss. So I want to report back. And I want to report back on the revenue losses due to the ambulance billing. I've been told that our contractor for ambulance billing has come in $10 million short because their systems were not in place, which, by the way, were a lot of the questions that I asked that day they were here. So those two things, let's get real about the revenue we're not seeing, because in a couple of these areas, and then if we need to make some different decisions regarding those, we can make those quickly. Thank you.
I could respond to both of those now, if you like.
No, I want to report back.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Mr. Parks?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Garcetti?
Mr. Garcetti is at the
one
table.
thing, and I think your four recommendations are good ideas. If we could maybe for clarity, is to add them to number 5 of number 63, where we're asking the CAO to come back with alternatives already, so that they're not splintered and that we can get like a more comprehensive. But if you look at number 63, that is on the special agenda, number 5, that's what the Budget and Finance Committee was asking for, as alternatives to the plan. And we just asked that your 4 items can be incorporated in that report.
Yes, but because of the time we're talking about, can it come directly back to council?
Oh, yeah. The thing is that we would like all that to come back, because We asked them to look at what's going on at LAX. We've asked them, but again, with your 4 items, if it goes to 63, we could get a comprehensive report about what are all the issues that are going forward. Ms. Hahn, one thing I want to mention. Ms. Hahn.
Yes.
One thing I want to mention on the issue, we've looked at that area of writing citations, or stop writing citations where the street sweepers, we felt that there's a legal issue of writing citations if you're not going to sweep the street. And that's what the reason for
I agree. I mean, I agree. I just want to see what impact that's had.
The impact. And the
I
other-
agree. What would make you madder if the streets, if you didn't get your streets swept and you got a ticket? I just want to know. I want to know the facts.
The other thing I think we asked them to do is tell us with the new meters, because they do function better and they're raising revenue on the new meters, that is the likelihood of why some of the enforcement dollars are down, because the meters are operating properly.
I want to see. Let's look at that.
All right, that's everyone on the queue, including Ms. Hahn for the 5th time. Okay, maybe 3rd time. Mr. Clerk, we want to hold this on the desk, go to the special, and then come back, or what's the will of the body? Shall we move forward on this, colleagues? All right. Mr. Clerk?
The last motion made would be the first motion voted on, and that was the Garcetti-Labange motion to have the CLA and CAO look at the 3 options, which include the CRA, to explore the restructuring of the pension funds and the sale of individual garages, and to also have DOT look at the operation side.
All right. That's the matter before us, colleagues. Open the roll.
Wait, hold on.
Mr. Garcetti? The maker of the motion, another comment.
Just one last thing. Colleagues, we can do this in open session. I have no problem with that. I do think that I would ask you, if we don't go into closed session, to talk to our advisors who we've paid very good money to get good advice, to hear what we can't maybe talk about publicly, not that there's any, for those listening out there, any secrets or conspiracies about, this is about the value if ever we're going to go to market, so it's important to keep that private. But I think if you look at the Chicago deal and an estimate that was given based on that, if you look at the differences without any of the changes, but just some things about our assets that are different than the Chicago ones, and then how that would reduce it, and let alone if we made any changes. But because that argument that if we made no changes, suddenly it would be worth a certain amount, please talk to them and hear what that amount would be in their estimate, the range even, because I think it'll be clear that even if we were to spend 6 more weeks or design something that wasn't a 6-week process, let's say, I don't know if this was even possible, go to the market and say, can you give us feedback in the next 2 weeks? Do you think without the stuff in it, you could even net this amount, just tell us if you'd even want to bid? Even that, I think, will not probably overwhelmingly get us to where some claim that we would be. So please do be informed about that if you don't want to go into closed session. I'm willing to go into closed session for you to hear that, but if folks want to just vote now, let's vote.
All right. So, again, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Very well. Thank you.
And now would be the Wesson-Hahn motion to reject the item.
On the Wesson-Hahn motion, open the roll, close the roll. This is on the Wesson-Hahn motion to reject. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Very well. Next item, please.
Mr. President, item 37 was being held on the desk. A corrected committee report has now been circulated, and the questions have been answered.
Number 37. Mr. Parks, number 37, sir.
Should have a new report. There was an error on the first committee report, and it should be circulated. So we want to approve the new report.
No one on the queue? No questions? Open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Next item, please.
Mr. President, there is a special one, and the attorney will speak to the findings.
Mr. City Attorney on special one.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the posting of today's agenda, the House of Representatives scheduled debate and a vote in Congress is imminent on House Resolution 1, the full-year continuing resolution Appropriations Act. Immediate action is required for the full council to state its position in opposition to H.R. 1 before the House votes on the matter. Council must first make findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2 before considering the substantive motion.
Mr. Rosendahl?
Obviously, I second this motion, and the reality is if the federal government stops supporting all of these programs that stimulate opportunities here and jobs, we're going to be in worse shape. So what they're playing around with in Washington, we clearly have to go on record and point out that some of these things, like we're looking at here, state and local law enforcement, juvenile justice, cops hiring, Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, these are all stuff that we accept as part of how we run and involve ourselves, public housing operations, energy efficiency grants. It's a whole myriad of projects that we be meeting here when we do the hour thing every other week. So this resolution is basically saying that the mayor and us agree that do not turn it off and make it even worse for us here in the city.
Very well. Now on the matter itself.
Mr. President, council still needs to make the findings first.
On the findings, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Now the matter is before us. Mr. Rosendahl?
Yes, I urge us all to vote yes on this.
Very well. See no one else on the queue? Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Why we
Very
need
well.
you in Washington.
Send that forthwith, please. Next item, please.
Mr. President, there is a special 2, and the city attorney will speak to the findings.
Mr. City Attorney, special 2?
Since the posting of today's agenda, the LAPD has requested that council offer a reward for information leading to the arrest of suspects responsible for the shooting death of Herbert Seymour Jr. on February 9th, 2011 at 10:40 p.m. near Western Avenue and 104th Street. Immediate action is required to arrest the suspect for the safety of the community. Council must first make findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2 before considering the substantive motion.
Ms. Perry on the findings.
Just checking, I think Mr. Parks wants to say a few words about this one.
Mr. Parks instead?
This was in his district.
All right, Mr. Parks, on the findings, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've been asked by LAPD, they have an unsolved homicide at 10421 Southwestern, 31-year-old victim, and they believe that this reward would assist them. Although this crime happened very recently, February 9th, they have no leads, and they believe it will stimulate interest. There was a news conference yesterday. We'd like to move forward on this. The family is very supportive of it, and we'd like to ask for a $50,000 reward for assistance in solving this crime.
On the findings, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, Mr. Parks?
Ditto.
All right.
Thank you.
Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Next item, please, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, council still has the special meeting before them. Do they wish to recess the regular and go into the special?
Yes, let's do that.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Weezer, Koretska, Coin, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Gussenstein, Garcetti, 11 members present, and a quorum, Mr. President.
All right.
This is a one-item agenda. Item 63 is an item for which public hearing has been held.
On this matter, Mr. Parks.
Have come up, colleagues, 63 gives us a overview of our financial status as relates to our revenue projections, and I think that the committee went through it very, very thoroughly, but it's really setting the stage as to the issues that we're going to be confronted with over the next couple of months. And I'd like to, one of the things that we are always as a council criticized because the numbers seem to fluctuate. We had a figure of $60 million or $53 million. We went forward, we found just under $30 million, and then all of a sudden our revenue projections now drop and the number goes back up. And so these are the issues of dealing with projections and also the revenue sources. And I thought it'd be good for the CAO to kind of walk us through some of their key review elements, or the revenue elements, just so you're aware of those that are in jeopardy, those that might be responding well. And these revenue projections are as of December 31st, so we clearly know that all of our funds for business tax are not in, and we've not gotten all of our property tax. So these are clearly moving forward on adjusting the projections based on the budget that came into effect July 1st. So Ray, why don't you walk us through that? I think we have a slide presentation for those that are interested in looking at those numbers.
Sure. Do you have the clicker? Yeah, sure. All right. So hopefully both on the screen and then at your desk we have basically just a few slides just talking about some trends in some of the key revenue categories. In our report overall we mentioned a overall deficit or increase deficit in our revenue, roughly about $25 million, and it's made up of a number of components. And I'll quickly start with slide 2, which this is our electric users tax, which is part of our overall utility users tax. If you recall, utility is made up of the 3 components: the electric, gas, and communications, which is the telephone. In the budget discussion last May, we were anticipating a little bit higher growth, actually in consumption and actually in sales. And unfortunately, as you can see, it looks like we're going to slip in budget in this particular category. And if you turn to slide 3, it actually rather punctuates the downward consumption in our gigawatt hours. And this certainly has generated is a key factor into why the electric users tax is down for the current year in the range of about $10 million. Gas on slide 4, this is one that we actually think we're going to be above budget, though we are concerned about the last bit of information for the last month or two. It appears to be sort of leveling off, but we do believe that actually we will see some additional revenue in the gas user tax to help us through and then offset part of the electric. Slide 5 is a telephone users tax. Here we're looking at approximate downward adjustment of roughly $5 to $6 million. As you can see from the chart, we had some very good growth in that particular revenue source through fiscal 8 and 9, and then in fiscal year 9, 10, and certainly as we go into 10, 11, we're on a very slower downward trend in this category. And simply it's a factor of 2 things. We're seeing a decrease in landline revenue with people certainly have moved to cell phones and more mobile devices. The landlines are no longer in use. In our sales tax, we just wanted to give you sort of an update as far as where the state is and some of their revenue and growth. As I think we've indicated previously, that we tend to mirror the state, though we're on sort of a delayed pattern of a 3-month or so. So as we've seen some increases in sales with overall in the state, we do believe we are going to be moving in the right direction. The budget originally had, in the mayor's proposed, we were looking at about 5% growth in this category. Budget adjusted it downward to the 4%. We do believe once we get the fourth quarter sales numbers from last year that they will be, we'll see some improvement there, and we probably believe that through the end of the year we'll be close to the 5% range in growth there. So as we get more information, we'll come back and give you updates on our sales tax number. One of the other key revenue sources that is down, we are seeing some growth, but not as much as we had hoped or had budgeted. This is our documentary transfer tax on slide 7. We anticipate to be in the range of about $4 to $5 million overall in that category as far as the drop in the current year. One of our key areas that actually we're seeing some positive revenue is in our hotel tax. This is very good, encouraging news, and this is a factor of increased business travel, and so certainly as we've seen business folks come back into Los Angeles, this is certainly a very welcome trend, and we hope actually we'll get more visitors coming forward in the few months and coming years. So we have a positive adjustment in the range of $7 to $8 million, and hopefully this trend will continue as we move into next year. Lastly, on slide 9, we do have a chart on the parking citations. I know we had a number of questions earlier. We had a little bit of discussion. This chart simply shows you the issuance of parking citations. And as you can see, probably through 2003 to 2007, we were more or less in the level as far as citation, a few ups and downs. But after beginning of fiscal year 7-8, we've seen a slow drop-off in the number of citations being issued. And this is one of the areas that we'll be working with DOT, Transportation, to try to get some additional information. We do believe a lot of this has to do, certainly in the last year or so, with the change out of heads, better collection methods, the ability to actually use a credit card. It is resulted in people actually making sure they have the appropriate amounts in the meters. But we'll be reporting back on further information on parking citations.
We put on a fireworks show with you.
Mr. Reyes?
When we look at these trends and we see this fluctuation, is there any way to create a nexus with the number of furloughs and types of furloughs that impact our capacity to collect? Could there be that type of...
We are looking at it, and certainly you have instructed us to look, when it comes to furloughs, and make sure we are not, getting ourselves in trouble as far as trying to minimize any of our revenue opportunities. Regarding traffic officers, they are not furloughed. So the furlough, when it comes to traffic officers, that is not an issue for them. They were exempted from the furlough program in the current year.
But there is a connection to street sweepers.
That is
just learning that there's certain streets that aren't being swept, and there's this connectivity between the capacity to perform and how we look at our streets.
Yeah, that is true. We understand that basically for those streets that perhaps are not being swept, that the DOT is not pursuing those areas as far as writing citations, and so there is a correlation there, and that would factor into this reduction as well.
But that's one example. Are there others? In planning, for example, there's an impact between fees for development, and there's a whole multiplier effect there with how a building performs, where it's built, how it's built. If you don't have the staff to produce and develop these documents, then that revenue goes down.
There are, and that would, all of those circumstances, actually in planning, actually when it comes to finance and a few others, that was looked at when we put the furlough program together. As you may recall, a number of departments were already on a 980 schedule, where basically they are off one day a week. And while folks departments have had some concern about, meeting all the workload, as far as we understand it, because approximately 80% of the folks were already off one day a week, that there's been minimal effect on revenue. Yeah.
But there's a report back, correct? That was one of our directives.
To look at it, yes, to reevaluate, that is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. LaBonge.
Much. I have a friendly amendment. I look at this nice little report that you did there, Mr. Serrano. But then furloughs is one word. It's very important. But also service reduction. What if you had a report, and members, and Ms. Hahn, maybe you could help in this here, to second this here, if we came up with key services to show how the services have decreased. Fire staffing from 2000, which we did expand our fire staffing. Previous Chief Bamatri was very adamant on EMTs and additional rescue units and stations throughout. That was a big advancement on that staffing, but we reduced it. Park operations on the staffing to show that. Library hours in circulation to show that. You see, this is similar. I use the idea of your form that you have right there, Ray. Street reconstruction, street resurfacing, miles paved in 2000. Go back to 1992, because back then, when they first started to ramp up on street resurfacing, the previous mayor, Mr. Reardon, put many 250 miles a year on street resurfacing. and see where we are. And also the thing, and forgive me, members who spoke of this, but Mr. Robertson, maybe it was you, Mr. Rosendahl, you said that he has teams, opportunities to serve, but not opportunities to put teams together. And how can we change that? We're working on Wilshire Boulevard now, funding from MTA to finally kill the cavities of potholes that exist in the curb lane made by the heavy buses, but we don't have the staffing ability. So I would like to see the report. May I borrow this for a second? I'd like to see this report created, and I'll work with the CLA's office in operational reports. So we see the number of citations given on street cleaning restrictions, the number of, and it's terrible that we give a citation if we're not given the service. We should be a fine city, not a fine city, if you know what that means. So this will help us not only internally with us in this council chambers, but with the public and with the neighborhood councils to understand the severity of the situation and the drastic change in services that the city has provided that can't be. Will you work with me on that?
We will.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Parks, our final speaker, I think.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ray, you may have done this already, but let me just ask if you can make sure the council is aware of, when you put in your report on the last paragraph, some of the pending items, if you can just give a thumbnail of what some of those things might cover, so they're aware of what would be forthcoming in the mid-year report. And again, we asked you for alternatives in the committee as part of, I believe, recommendation number 4. We asked you to look at different recommendations, and one of them we specifically asked for is a recommendation that does not increase furloughs. So that's what was intended for number 4. So can you just give a little idea so council's aware of what what you're referring to in that last paragraph?
Sure. There were a number of items that we had put on the table that were held until further discussion. Excuse me, until we were able to come back with an update on the P3 concession. There are several items, and I believe Miguel mentioned both of them earlier today. So there was the Clean and Green funding reduction of 40%. There was reducing appropriation to Rec and Parks of approximately $2.8 million. There was also an increased transfer with SPRF funds from surplus funds. And then also there was possibly additional, possible revenue from SPRF due to increased rates or changes to subsidy programs. Now, we did mention additional 5 furlough days, and I know we were instructed to come back with additional reductions that are more permanent and substance in nature. And through the mid-year, we are going to be laying out a number of proposals. Some will help us this year. Most of them, if not all of them, I should say all of them actually will help us next year as we deal with the $350 million shortfall for next year.
Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. I'd ask that we approve the Budget and Finance Report as amended for number 4. Just to clarify on the other options, one specifically was with and without the additional furloughs. Also, we'd ask on number 5 that it be inclusive of the 4 recommendations Mr. Garcetti made on number 44 to be a part of that overall report back. And then one item that was missed in the committee report, Mr. Rosendahl asked that there be basically a report back on the counting of lost revenue for hotels and projects located in the CRA areas that may have been deferred until future years. For example, the downtown Marriott Ritz-Carlton Hotel deal deferred for a bed tax for 25 years, resulting in a loss of revenue. So that was asked to be added as an amendment to the committee report. I'd ask that we approve the committee report as amended, and that we certainly look forward to the CAO coming back with the mid-year and additional information as it relates to our cash flow and our overall revenue projections.
Mr. Rosendahl, followed by Mr. Labange.
Parks just said what I was going to say, which is put that in there and let's get those answers back. I want to understand all that, what kind of revenues that we might be able to do. Thank you, Bernard.
Now Ms. Hahn, then Mr. Labange.
Hahn's recommendation and Mr. Garcetti's recommendation.
Thank you.
Ms. Hahn for a first time, and then Mr. Labange after Ms. Hahn.
No, I just thought it makes sense if you're including Mr. Garcetti's revenue questions on the last item to be included in this. I think mine would also be appropriate to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange, and then we have two public speakers after.
This is a technical question, Mr. City Attorney. If I'm in bounds, please let me know. If I recall, sick time, every year the city sends a check for those who have excessive sick time over
800 hours.
800. Do we still do that? Do you know how much that is approximately?
I don't have the number on top of my head, but we can get you that number.
Do you think it's $10 million?
I don't believe it's quite that high, but it's under $10 million. But given the MOUs, there's been certain provisions that have been laid out in some of the MOUs.
But on that particular issue, I think people are more sick of furloughs than anything else, and if there's $10 million, that could be given credit time to the employee's service to the city as opposed to cash. There's still a benefit for the employee when they complete their service. Could you look at that, Ray? Because I always felt that it was something that possibly could...
We'll include that in our employee relations discussion.
Some of those things that we could come to the table and say, look, here's real money to keep real people, but they get a credit in the future as they have earned. But look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. That's the final speaker on the queue. We have two public speakers on this matter, Arnold Sachs and Charles Leon, our two speakers. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Arnold Sachs. Actually, some very interesting things, part of the conversations today. One was hearing from Councilman Parks regarding the 4 years it's been discussed regarding the parking garages, yet it was only last year that the mayor came up with this brilliant idea, publicizing the selling of the parking garages. So let's just go with the 4-year part of it, for instance, and say that would be fiscal year 2007, 2008, right around the time you were agreeing on the pay raise in case you laid people off for the one budget year that was last year. Additionally, Councilman Labange made some comments regarding property tax that taken off the roll because it's taken over by the school board. So we go back to the DWP and mention, what about a report on the amount of property tax that the DWP would pay in lieu of paying this transfer, and what is the standards on that right now? Those are some areas. A, the property tax would be an area to look at because it's going to be the public paying one way or the other. But B, I'm really concerned about hearing 4 years because I know, for instance, people have come up on this side of the microphone and discussed the fee waivers that were constantly being granted by the city, and that went on for 3 years, and it took almost 3 years for something to be implemented. It must have been because that was an old council, and we have new, more open and transparent council members at this time. And I'll take one water, please.
Thank you. Our next speaker, and that'll be our final speaker on this matter.
Thank you so much for your time. Charles Leon for the Coalition of City Unions and SCIU. I also represent the great men and women of the Bureau of Street Services. And then I also have this job at SCIU with a lens that's pretty unique. I'm actually a former council aide working here in the city of Los Angeles. I know what those field officers are like in your council districts. When you get those phone calls at 9 o'clock in the morning or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and those phone calls that you get, what are most of the phone calls that your field reps are telling you that they get? It's the potholes, it's the broken streets, it's the tree limbs, okay? This guy right here, okay, the CIO's office, they don't have to get those phone calls from your constituents. You do. And those constituents remember when you want to pursue something else in your career, those constituents and those block clubs, they remember whether or not that pothole got filled. They remember whether or not that street got repaired. The Bureau of Street Services, folks, has a budget of $144 million. Only $19 million of their total budget is off the general fund. They have money from Measure R, they have gas tax money, they have federal money, they have ARA funds. And the CAO, you ask them, well, why can't we get off of furloughs? And, you know, pick a day. Tuesday, pick Wednesday. It'll be a different excuse. The reimbursable rate, or we can't get this back, or it doesn't solve this objective. But your constituents want these services. And even if you want to buy some of these arguments that the CAO wants to put forward as to why we should still have furloughs for the street service employees, look at the sitting millions that the Bureau of Street Services has in the gas tax money. They're saying to the city, we want to give this to you. Take us off of furloughs. We have the unused gas tax. And how this is not a matter of emergency, that we only have till June the 30th, that window of opportunity is shrinking, and just another day is gone, the lights will turn out here at City Hall. Give street services the ability to get off furloughs and have those options. The Board of Public Works endorsed the matter. You've all seen the letter.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Clerk? Mr. Clerk?
$500,000 we're losing the citations because the sweepers are.
Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
The Budget and Finance Committee report as amended is before you.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
The Budget and Finance Committee report as amended for the additional report backs is before council.
All right. Is there a vote required?
A vote is required.
All right, colleagues, open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Next item.
Mr. President, that takes care of the items in the special meeting. Do you wish to adjourn the special and go back to the regular?
Yes, sir.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Posted and referred.
The desk is clear.
Very well. Any announcements, colleagues? Announcements, looking for announcements. Ms. Hahn for announcement.
Well, I just thought it was worthy to know that the City Maven did a little poll recently on who loves the city of Los Angeles the most. And a lot of people's names were put forward, even Randy Newman, who wrote, of course, I Love L.A. Who do you think got the most votes on who loves L.A. the most? Tom LaBonge, no surprise here.
I want to thank my parents, I really do, because they taught me how to love this city. They were born in this city.
You know, it's tough. Anyway, congratulations, Tom. The City Maven.
Any other announcements, colleagues? Mr. LaBonge? All right. Adjourning motions. Anyone for adjourning motions? Ms. Perry has adjourning motions. Please stand in the audience. Please stand. Ms. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This first adjourning motion is in memory of Herbert Seymour, Jr., who was 31 years of age and died on February the 9th, 2011. He was killed on Western Avenue and at 104th and Western. He resided with his family in the city of Los Angeles for over 31 years and has been a model citizen, and he is survived by a daughter and a son. There is a motion that's been introduced to seek a reward of $50,000 to motivate someone to come forward and state who is responsible for this murder. And it's not only our objective to solve this murder, but to provide this family with a sense of justice and some closure. Herbert Seymour, Jr. The second adjourning motion is in memory of...
I saw the news and showed the devastation. This man worked. He loved his family. All he did is walk across the street in the cold night air. He had a hood up on his sweatshirt, and some very bad person attacked him and killed him.
Yeah.
So it's very important for the public to reach out and find the soul of the bad person and bring him to justice.
Great. The next one is in memory of Vera Brown Curtis Hayes, born September the 20th, 1943, died February the 8th, 2011. She was a graduate of Fisk University, received a master's degree from Michigan State. She married her high school sweetheart, William Curtis. They moved to Los Angeles, where they had a son, William Curtis, Jr. She taught night classes at Whittier College School. She taught school while attending night classes at Whittier College School of Law. She earned her Juris Doctorate in 1981 and became a private practitioner in criminal law, probate, and family law. And she co-founded the firm of Mallory, Brown, Curtis, and Mallory in 1986, returned to private family law practice in 1996. She was an advocate for humanity and continued her personal and family heritage of community service. She was the president of the Black Women's Lawyers Association, an active member of the National Bar Association, California Association of Black Lawyers, the County Bar, California Women Lawyers Association, the League of African American Women, and she served as a commissioner on the State Bar of California Trust Fund, overseeing the distribution of funds to civil legal service providers. She had an exceptional passion for three organizations: the Los Angeles chapter of the Links, the Black Women Lawyers, and the Black Women Lawyers of Los Angeles Foundation, and the Harriet Buhai Center for Family Law. She continued her mission of community service while leading the National Organization of the Links of accomplished African American women who devoted their time and efforts to charitable causes and to the mentoring of young black women as they developed their education and careers. She was also an athlete, competed in 6 Los Angeles marathons. She loved to cycle. She power walked, and during ski season, she could be found in the slopes on skis or on a snowboard. Her gardening skills were only rivaled by her love for poetry. She was ahead of the curve as an environmentalist. Before it was fashionable, she prepared creative mixtures of compost to enrich the soil. Her potions produced mammoth sunflowers that brushed the roof eaves and framed her home, in addition to massive zucchini, tomatoes, and squash yielded by her vegetable garden each year. She married her longtime friend and companion, Freddie Hayes. She is survived by her son, William A., her sister Joy Baker, her brother Frederick Brown, and a host of family and friends. And I'd like to second both of these for Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Any other adjourning motions, colleagues? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.